Noel was your typical edgy young man, all brooding looks and grand ambitions of becoming the world's strongest seeker. He pictured himself slaying monsters, basking in glory, and maybe even scoring a cool nickname. But fate had other plans for him. Instead of a fierce warrior, he found himself stuck with the weakest support class imaginable, the talker. Yes, the talker. While other classes were out there swinging swords and casting spells, Noel's main skill was basically chatting people up, great for making friends, not so much for battling demons. On this particular day, the universe decided to crank the chaos dial up to 11. The matchmaking system, which was supposed to pair seekers with appropriately leveled demons, went haywire. Instead of a manageable level 3 encounter, his village was suddenly besieged by level 12 demons. It was as if someone threw a demon party and forgot to send out the do not enter invitations. Noel's grandfather, the village's one-man army, took one look at the incoming horde and grabbed his trusty axe. This wasn't just any axe. It was so large it could probably double as a door for a tiny house. Noel watched, his heart racing. His grandpa was tough. Legend had it he once took down a level 13 demon, earning the rather ominous nickname Over Death. But really, what did that even mean? It sounded impressive until you realized that this was an entirely different level of crazy. As his grandpa charged into battle, swinging that massive axe like it was made of feathers, Noel felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Maybe he should have learned a few fighting skills instead of perfecting the art of conversation. What was he supposed to do now? Stand behind a bush and cheer? The idea of composing a dramatic eulogy flashed through his mind. He figured he'd at least try to shout some moral support, because that was definitely going to be more useful than anything he was actually capable of at that moment. After watching his grandfather charge into battle, Noel felt an unexpected surge of determination. Maybe it was the adrenaline or the sheer absurdity of the situation, but he decided it was time to face the demons himself. Armed with nothing but his wits, and, well, a few half-baked plans, he ventured out. Against all odds, he actually managed to put up a decent fight, taking out a bunch of demons like he was in some epic video game montage. But even a decent showing wasn't enough to save his grandpa. It didn't take long for Noel to realize things were going south fast. His grandpa, despite being a seasoned warrior, was getting overwhelmed. It was as if the demons had formed a union and decided that today was Cook the Old Man Day. In the chaos, Noel watched in horror as his grandfather's legs appeared to warp into a different time zone altogether. It was a brutal reminder of the stakes involved in this line of work. Rushing to his grandfather's side, Noel felt a mix of fear and heartbreak. His grandpa, barely holding on, offered a weak apology for not being strong enough to fulfill his promise of survival. It was gut-wrenching to hear, a seasoned fighter reduced to this. His grandpa explained that if he wanted to protect the village, this was the fate all seekers faced, a grim reality that came with the life of combat they had chosen. With tears welling up in his eyes, Noel wrestled with the weight of those words. Was this truly the path he wanted? He could see the danger laid bare before him, yet something deep inside wouldn't let go. In that moment, he declared that he would become the most powerful seeker in the world, not just for himself, but to carry on his grandpa's legacy. He vowed to honor the sacrifices made and turn the tide for future generations. It was a promise born from pain but fueled by an unbreakable resolve, even if it meant facing the very demons that had taken so much from him. We cut to the present day, and there's Noel, now a fully fledged seeker, trying to channel his grandpa's spirit while navigating the chaos of battle. He might have promised to become the most powerful seeker in the world, but let's just say he didn't exactly hit the gym with the same enthusiasm as others. He was still rocking the weakest support class, yes, the talker, while his teammates wielded flashy weapons and cast impressive spells. Today's foes? A horde of lesser vampires. While they couldn't use magic, thankfully, they were still a real pain to deal with. These bloodsuckers could regenerate faster than Noel could come up with witty quips, and the real kicker was that their queen could churn out new minions in no time flat. It was like an endless supply of pestering little nuisances that just wouldn't quit. Noel stood at the front, trying to command his teammates with the authority of a seasoned leader, even though he was far from the strongest on the team. "All right, team, listen up," he shouted, trying to sound as commanding as possible. "Don't let your guard down. Each lesser vampire is tough as nails and can keep going even when they're practically falling apart. We need to double-tack every single one." It felt ridiculous to be the one barking orders, especially when he was the least combat-ready. But someone had to keep the team focused, right? As the lesser vampires lunged at them, Noel did his best to keep spirits high, offering tactical advice while mentally calculating how long it would take for one of them to turn him into a midnight snack. His heart raced as he watched his teammates dive into the fray, and he couldn't help but hope that maybe, just maybe, his words would guide them through this vampire-infested mess. After all, he was determined to live up to his grandfather's legacy, even if it meant being the cheerleader from the sidelines. As the party pressed deeper into the dungeon, tension hung in the air like a thick fog. Walter, always looking for the shortcut to glory, casually tossed out the idea of skipping the lesser vampires entirely and making a beeline for the vampire queen. Why don't we just ignore these little guys and go straight for the main event? We'll finish this mission in no time. Noel rolled his eyes. It was a classic case of Walter thinking with his ego instead of his head. That's a dumb idea, he shot back. If we charge in without dealing with the lesser vampires, we'll end up surrounded and overwhelmed while trying to fight the queen. We're already struggling as a C-ranked party. Reckless moves like that will get us all killed. Walter shrugged, his expression dripping with sarcasm. Sure. I'll just listen to you because you're the all-important talker of the party, he quipped, an exaggerated tone making it clear he wasn't too keen on taking orders. It stung a little, and Noel took a deep breath. Sure, as the talker, he could enhance his teammates with buffing words, providing them with the kind of motivation that could lift their spirits, or at least distract them from the very real danger they were facing. But when it came to actual strength, his stats were far below average, which was a constant source of frustration. He was a great strategist, but it didn't exactly make him feel like a hero when he was standing there with a clipboard while others took on the heavy lifting. Still, he knew his words could make a difference, and he was determined to prove his worth. So he took a moment to rally the team, reminding them that teamwork and careful strategy were what would lead them to victory, not reckless charges that could turn them into vampire snacks. If he could keep them focused and aware, maybe they'd not only survive but thrive in this dungeon full of lesser vampires and their formidable queen. Noel turns around and is about to roast Walter's self-confidence when he notices a lesser vampire camping on the ceiling, definitely planning something. He orders his team to take cover. Just then, the vampire releases a poisonous cloud, and Noel is caught right in the middle of it. The others see that Noel is in danger and want to rush over to save him, but before they can act, they get attacked by the vampire, and Tanya gets knocked down. Walter and Lloyd try to stop the demon, but without Noel's buffs, they are much weaker than they were before. Walter pleads with Noel to snap out of it and give them some orders. Noel hears this and has a flashback to the day his grandpa died. He swears to himself that he won't let anyone else die and pulls out a gun to fire several shots at the demon while also drinking a health potion to recover from the poison. He may not have the same kind of strength his grandfather did, but that doesn't mean he is completely useless, and he plans to showcase just how important a talker can be. He activates his talker tactician skill, and now when he gives his teammates orders, their abilities are boosted by 25%. He then uses his battle voice skill and is able to increase the stamina and mana of his team. With Noel's help, the team is now able to hold their ground, but above them, Tamia spots 3 more demons and starts freaking out. So Noel uses one of his skills to get her to calm down. If everything goes according to plan from here, Noel predicts that the team should be able to finish off the monsters in 74 seconds. He tells the others that he will handle the rest of the lesser vampires, so they should focus on taking down the queen and prepare to use their strongest attacks. As the lesser vampires attack Noel, he uses a speech technique and yells at them to make them freeze in place. Once they are unable to move, he uses his magic gun to shoot an ice bullet and encase them in a block of ice. Unfortunately, one of the lesser vampires managed to dodge the attack, but Noel still had 1 bullet left in the chamber. He has the option of freezing the last lesser vampire to save himself. However, he decides to fire the bullet at the queen to distract her and provide an opening for his teammates. Thanks to this, Walter and Lloyd are able to hit the queen with their ultimate moves and take her down. But when Tanya turns to Noel to celebrate their victory, she's horrified to see him getting stabbed by the lesser vampire. Fortunately, it turns out that Noel wasn't really stabbed. He perfectly calculated everything to ensure he would survive. He knew that once the queen was defeated, all the lesser vampires would naturally stop moving, and there was just enough time for him to avoid being killed. With that, the team had successfully cleared the dungeon, and the ominous abyss surrounding it began to dissipate like last night's takeout. Noel's teammates rushed over, faces a mix of relief and exasperation. They knew he'd orchestrated the whole plan with the precision of a maestro, but still couldn't help but give him a good-natured scolding for recklessly endangering his life. After all, planning was one thing, putting himself in harm's way was another. As they fussed over him, Noel couldn't help but reflect on that fateful day he discovered he was a talker, not exactly the heroic class he'd envisioned. He remembered curling up in a ball, sobbing like a toddler who'd just lost their favorite toy. He had longed to be a warrior like his grandpa, swinging swords and battling beasts, not merely chatting his way out of trouble. His grandfather had knelt beside him, a twinkle in his eye as he reassured Noel. He had spoken with the wisdom of someone who'd seen countless battles, telling him not to fret. Those words of encouragement had been a lifeline, igniting a spark of determination within Noel, ever since he embraced his role as a talker with all the enthusiasm of a kid in a candy store. Sure, he might not swing a sword like a pro, but he could talk a storm and convince even the fiercest monsters to take a nap. Standing amidst his teammates, Noel felt a surge of pride. If he could talk a demon into a timeout, he figured he was doing just fine. In a world where swords clashed and spells flew, sometimes the greatest power lay in knowing how to sweet-talk his way out of a sticky situation. Determined to prove that being a talker was just as vital as any warrior class, Noel felt ready to take on whatever challenges awaited him, one witty quip at a time. After their mission was complete, the party made their way back to Etria, the bustling capital of the Velet Empire, to report their success. The atmosphere of the city was electric, a mix of excitement and relief, as the Empire was particularly susceptible to abyss attacks compared to other nations. To combat this ongoing threat, the Empire had developed an impressive array of magical technology, all powered by materials harvested from demons. This tech was vital for the defense of the city, and the only way to gather those materials was through the efforts of Seekers. As a result, Seekers held a special place in the hearts of the public. They were celebrated not just as adventurers, but as heroes contributing significantly to society. Noel officially became a Seeker at the age of 15, a decision that led him to Etria, where he quickly realized he couldn't take on the world alone. So he set out to find companions who could complement his skills, forming a team that balanced out their strengths and weaknesses. Walter, the warrior of the party, was a towering figure with a heart to match his brawn. He wielded his massive sword like it was a toy, charging into battle with an enthusiasm that often left the rest of the team scrambling to keep up. Then there was Tanya, the healer, whose gentle demeanor belied her fierce determination. She could mend wounds with a mere touch, ensuring the team could bounce back from any scrape. Finally, there was Lloyd, the swordsman, quick and agile, dancing around foes with a grace that made combat look like an art form. Although Noel would have loved to add a scout to their roster for some extra stealth and reconnaissance, he couldn't complain too much. Their team was well balanced enough to handle most challenges that came their way. With the camaraderie they'd built and the shared goal of defending Etria, they felt ready to face whatever threats lurked in the shadows. Together, they were not just a party, they were a family, united by purpose and a shared love for adventure. Walter notices that Noel is being really quiet for some reason and asks if something is wrong. The party got a reward of 5 million Phil for completing the quest, so Walter asks if Noel is upset that they didn't negotiate for more money. He then tells Noel that a Seeker shouldn't get so hung up on money, and that his grandpa probably would have said the same thing. On the contrary, the first lesson Grandpa taught Noel was that no matter what he does, he better be getting paid top dollar because he can't risk his life just to go home broke. With that being said, Noel definitely wanted a higher reward and couldn't care less about what Walter thinks, but he will let it go just this once. Tanya shot Walter a disapproving look, telling him to quit bothering Noel. Walter, however, wasn't having it. He insisted that Noel should show him more respect since he was 2 years older. This prompted Noel to roll his eyes, reminding him that in the world of Seekers, age meant nothing. The only thing that truly earned respect was strength, and right now, he was starting to question whether Walter was competent enough to deserve any at all. Walter's frustration boiled over. He exploded, yelling that Noel was the only incompetent one in the group, always giving orders from the back while the rest of them put their lives on the line at the front. Noel felt a wave of confusion and anger wash over him. He had thought they had a good dynamic, but this confrontation made him realize that his teammates might see him as a burden despite all he did for them. Just as Noel was about to throw one last insult at Walter and escalate the argument into a full-blown fight, Lloyd stepped in, separating the two before things could go south. With a calm but firm presence, he diffused the tension, reminding them both that they needed to work together, not tear each other apart. To shift the mood, Lloyd suggested they call it a day and start dividing up their rewards from the mission. It was a sensible distraction, and slowly the atmosphere lightened as they began to focus on the positives. Yet in the back of Noel's mind, the sting of Walter's words lingered. He wondered if his role in the party was truly valued, or if he was just the one left standing at the back, out of sight and out of mind. A little while later, the team found themselves sitting by a fountain in Etria, the sound of water splashing providing a calming backdrop to their discussion. Tanya looked visibly disappointed as she counted her share of the rewards, shaking her head at how little they'd ended up with after such a difficult mission. Lloyd, always the practical one, chimed in to explain that after accounting for all the equipment costs and taxes, there was only 1 million Phil left to split among them. With 4 team members, that meant each person was getting a mere 250,000. He acknowledged her frustration but reminded everyone that their party's funds were steadily increasing. He was sure that with the next big mission, they would see better returns. Noel, however, couldn't help but interject, pointing out the harsh reality of their situation. He lamented that there probably wouldn't be a next time since they rarely got big missions. The high-profile Abyss quests were typically snagged by established clans, leaving smaller parties like theirs scrambling for scraps. Even when they did manage to get missions, they faced the daunting prospect of penalty fees if they failed to clear them on their own. It was a grim cycle that felt far from sustainable. The group fell silent, the weight of Noel's words hanging in the air. Each of them had their own aspirations and dreams of becoming formidable seekers, but the harsh truth was that the system often kept them on the sidelines. They could see the high rewards going to those who had already proven themselves in the arena, while they were left to fight over a fraction of the spoils. As they sat there, the sound of the fountain continued to bubble, but the hope of a brighter future felt a little dimmer for the moment. That aside, Noel asks Lloyd how much money their party has in its joint funds account. Lloyd tells him they have 12.8 million saved up, so Noel suggests that the team should invest that money in forming their own clan. Everyone is shocked that he would suggest such a thing, and Lloyd tries to explain all the reasons why they can't do that, mainly because they would be required to pay 20 million to the country in order to set one up, and they don't have that much money. However, Noel isn't deterred and says he is willing to use 7.2 million of his personal money to make up the difference. He knows it's an expensive decision, but he assures everyone that in the long run, they'll gain much more money since they won't be limited to leftover quests anymore. Lloyd then points out that they would need to acquire a base of operations within the capital, and rent prices are outrageous nowadays. However, Noel has already got that covered and found a cheap building for their team to rent. Tanya then chimes in and mentions that they are all still C-ranked newbies, so they couldn't possibly handle running a clan. But Noel doesn't think that's a good excuse to avoid forming a clan. If they don't take the leap now, then they'll never be ready to run a clan on their own. Noel has been studying all about how to run a clan, so he knows all about the necessary procedures that need to be taken. The only thing he lacks is experience, and the only way to gain clan experience is to start a clan. While it may be difficult, there's no other way. Noel makes a good point, but Lloyd is stuck in his own little world of trust issues. He thinks they won't be given any decent jobs because they haven't proven themselves trustworthy. Classic Lloyd, always overthinking things. But Noel, with his unwavering confidence, knows better. He's convinced they'll land a slew of high-profile gigs, and it has nothing to do with their reliability. Nope, it's all about looks. In this country, being a great seeker means being a hero and an idol, and if you're hot, you get the royal treatment. Tanya, ever the voice of reason, raises her eyebrows at this plan. She thinks it's a bad idea to essentially sell themselves based on their appearance. But Walter? He's all in, practically bouncing off the walls at the thought of leaving behind their dull, mundane lives. He's tired of scraping by, living paycheck to paycheck while dreaming of a life filled with fame, wealth, and maybe even a reality TV show. I mean, who wouldn't want their own highlight reel featuring slow-motion shots of them dramatically tossing their hair while saving the day? While Tanya's worried about their dignity, Walter's eyes sparkle at the thought of glitzy parties, brand endorsements, and maybe even a calendar shoot. Imagine Hot Seekers of the Year. He pictures himself on billboards, flexing like he's just discovered a new superpower. Meanwhile, Tanya is left trying to convince him that they don't need to exploit their looks to get ahead. But Walter, fueled by a mix of ambition and the latest influencer trends, is already mapping out his path to fame. As they all weigh their options, it becomes clear the road to success might be paved with questionable decisions. But for Walter, the allure of fame is hard to resist. After all, who doesn't want to be adored for their good looks while simultaneously saving the world? It's a win-win, right? Walter and Noel are in agreement on this, so Noel asks Lloyd what his opinion is as the leader of the party. If Lloyd wants to say no, then Noel is prepared to quit the party and take his share of the savings so he can form a clan with someone else. Because he has a dream to become the strongest seeker, He won't let anything get in his way. Lloyd gets a dark look in his eye as he is left with no choice but to accept Noel's demands. However, he suggests they discuss the details of this clan formation the day after tomorrow. Walter is fine with that, and Noel is glad he was able to get Tanya and Lloyd on board with his idea. So he leaves to rest for the night. However, later that day, Walter comes running to Noel with terrible news as he has just discovered that Lloyd and Tanya have betrayed them and disappeared with all the money. After Noel reads the letter, he confirms what happened. Lloyd invested all his money in NFTs a couple of years back, and now he is in a deep pile of debt. So he embezzled the party's money to pay off his debt and fled the capital before he could be found out. Noel finds this whole thing insanely funny, since Lloyd always upheld the act of a noble and chivalrous person. But getting down to business, Noel asks Walter when and where he found this letter. Walter explains that he heard about a really good job last night, so he headed to Lloyd's room first thing in the morning to tell him about it. But by the time he arrived, Lloyd had already cleaned out his room, and that's when the innkeeper showed him the letter. According to the innkeeper, Lloyd and Tanya left the inn around 8:00 p.m. last night, just before the city gates closed. And under normal circumstances, neither Noel nor Walter would have found out about this until the following afternoon. So Lloyd was trying to buy as much time as possible before the escape. It's 9:30 in the morning now, so while they may have found out sooner than Lloyd expected, it has still been over half a day. So he and Tanya must have covered a considerable distance by now. However, the gates must have records of which direction they were headed in, and they most likely left on foot. So Noel and Walter should be able to catch up if they take a horse. Walter is eager to get going, but Noel reminds him that this isn't as simple as chasing after them and getting the money back. Those two chose to abandon their party, and that's a definite betrayal. So worst case, if they catch up and confront them, it'll become a battle to the death. And even if they beat Lloyd and Tanya, it would be a waste of time because Lloyd already spent all their money. But that doesn't mean Noel is going to let them get away without suffering for what they did. After getting dressed, Noel takes Walter down to the local tavern. But Walter doesn't understand why they are here. Noel doesn't want to waste time explaining the plan to Walter since he's too dumb to understand it anyway. So he just tells him to follow his lead. Noel heads inside and immediately gets the attention of everyone in the tavern. He tells them that 2 members of his party have stolen his party's money and escaped the capital. So he's willing to pay 2 million fils to anyone who can bring them back alive. Walter starts freaking out and asks Noel why he went and announced the predicament to the entire tavern. But Noel says there's a particular person he's looking for, so he just did this to save time. The first party to accept Noel's mission is the Lightning Bite Party, so Noel gives the leader all the information he has about Lloyd and Tanya's escape. And soon after, several more parties decide to take the job. But Noel still hasn't found the person he was looking for. All of a sudden, a shady-looking man approaches Noel about his job offer. And this guy looks like he knows something, which is what Noel was waiting for. They head outside to talk, and the man explains that he saw a couple leaving town yesterday, and they perfectly match the description Noel gave. He's sure he knows where they are headed. The only problem is that the man's party isn't strong enough to defeat Lloyd and Tanya on their own, so Noel offers to help, but he will only be paying the man 1 million in exchange. The man tries to argue for the 2 million, but Noel has already read him like a book, so he knows that the man is too broke to turn down the 1 million. Eventually, the man caves in and agrees to the terms, so Noel tells him to get his party ready and meet him at the south gate. He also tells Walter to wait for him there because Noel has something he needs to do first. A little while later, Noel is done with his preparations until he meets everyone at the front gate, and Walter has something he has been meaning to talk to Noel about. He wants to know if Noel is going to be alright fighting Lloyd and Tanya. But Noel has no reservations about it, and he will gladly kill them with no mercy whatsoever. Walter can't believe Noel feels nothing after they were partners for so long, but from the day they met, Noel had already come up with contingency plans to take them down if they ever betrayed him. He even has a plan to take down Walter, so he never actually trusted any of them to begin with, and Walter could stand to be less trusting in the future. Later that day, in a remote village, Lloyd and Tanya are walking, and Lloyd assures her that they should be safe for now, so they can rest easy tonight. He assured that there is no way Noel would be petty enough to come after them, even though the money has already been spent. But Lloyd gravely underestimated how Noel really is because he appears behind them along with a full squad of people to capture them. Lloyd is about to draw his sword to fight, but Noel uses his ability to tell him not to move, and both he and Tanya are stunned in place. Now that Lloyd has nowhere left to run, Walter begins yelling at him for his betrayal. However, before he can punch Lloyd's face in, Noel says there's something he wants to ask. He knows that Lloyd already spent all the party's savings, but the money they got paid for the vampire hunt must still be in his possession, right? Lloyd denies having the money and says he used that as well. So Noel asks if he spent it on another failed NFT business, but Lloyd admits that he used the money to pay back his debts. The way Lloyd answers gives Noel all the information he needs, so he now realizes that Lloyd is a serial gambler. He must have gambled so much that he ended up in trouble with some debt collectors. But no one wants to hear it from Lloyd's mouth. Lloyd is about to apologize again, but Walter cuts him off and yells at him for gambling away all the money they worked hard to save. Lloyd gives up on the innocent act and tells Walter back that he is the real victim here. He didn't want to touch the party's money, but gambling was so much fun. And besides, it was their own fault for dumping the responsibility of leading on his shoulders. At this point, Noel has heard enough BS, so he kicks Lloyd in the face and starts stomping on him for thinking he could get away with such half-assed blame shifting. He was the one who said he wanted to become the leader, all just so he could fund his gambling addiction. Before long, Lloyd has been beaten bloody, and he is begging for forgiveness. But Noel has never heard of such a word, so he will gladly beat Lloyd 1,000 times until he is satisfied. Tanya speaks up and begs Noel to spare Lloyd, and Noel says fine, but only if she's willing to take the beating in his place. Noel is a proud believer in gender equality, so he has no problem curb stomping her if that's what she really wants. He uses his power and tells her to confess her involvement, and once she is compelled to tell the truth, she admits that she gambled the party's money with Lloyd. In fact, she's even more of a gambling addict than Lloyd is. The move Noel used forces the target to reveal the absolute truth, no matter what, for a short amount of time. Once Tanya regains her senses, she yells at Noel for daring to use mind control on her because it is against imperial law in Lee. She is right about it being illegal to use mind control for personal reasons, but right now she is the criminal here, so Noel's use of mind control is considered interrogation and is perfectly legal. Now that Noel is done talking to the traitors, the man asks Noel for his payment. Noel agrees to pay him, but he just needs a minute first. The man doesn't like being told to wait, so he grabs Noel and accuses him of trying to scam them out of the money. But Noel drags the man to the floor and assures him that he will be paid for his work, so he should just be quiet and wait. The man is pissed, so he draws his knife and is about to attack Noel. Threatening Noel was the worst mistake he could have made because Noel immediately knocks him unconscious with a punch to the chest. Noel had learned this technique from his grandpa by experiencing it firsthand. It is a strong blow directly to the area above the heart and can temporarily paralyze the heart muscles, causing even the most experienced seekers to faint if done properly. Noel's grandpa wanted him to learn this technique because, as a talker, he can't buff himself, so this would at least give him some offensive ability. The man's teammates drag his unconscious body out of the road, and soon enough, a friend of Noel's pulls up in a fancy carriage. The man is an infamous slave trader, Finocchio Barini, and he seems to be on good terms with Noel. He is the leader of the Barini family, and Noel knows him to be quite eccentric and zesty, but he's the only one that can help him out. If it wasn't obvious yet, Noel intends to sell Lloyd and Tanya to Theo as slaves in order to make back the money they stole from him. Tanya protests, but Noel reminds her that he could always just turn her into the police, and jail time here means she will be sent down to the mines. Let me tell you, the mines are not fun. They have a much higher chance of surviving if they become slaves and hopefully get bought by a kind master. With that said, Noel asks Finocchio to begin evaluating the two for sale. But when he's done, Finocchio only offers to buy them for $6 million. Noel says that isn't enough, and Finocchio apologizes but states that this is a bad time for him, so he can't offer any more than this. The Holy Cross Church is about to decree that everyone must take a vow of poverty, so if Theo offered top dollar for Lloyd and Tanya, it would draw too much attention, and he would like to avoid that. Noel realizes the church holds so much influence over a family as powerful as the Benazzi family, but it doesn't matter. He says he will accept $11 million as payment. It takes a while for Finocchio to realize, but when he does, he starts yelling about Noel trying to get an extra $5 million. Because of the constant yelling, Noel keeps increasing the price until he is eventually asking for $15 million when Finocchio initially only offered $6 million. Finocchio is starting to get really pissed off, but Noel tells him that if he buys the two for $15 million, he will tell everyone that Finocchio only paid $15 million. The church's decree just means Pinocchio can't buy things that are overpriced. But if he claims that Lloyd and Tanya are genuinely worth the money, people will be lining up to buy them solely because they are expensive. If Pinocchio plays his cards right, he might even be able to sell them for as high as 90 million. Pinocchio is insanely impressed by how cunning Noel is, so he offers him a leadership position in his family, but Noel turns him down. Fio understands, and he is on board with the deal, but before he finalizes things, he goes over to the scruffy guy in his party to warn them not to say a word about any of this unless they want to die painful deaths. With that said, he hands Noel a down payment for the 2 slaves and begins taking them away. Tanya pleads with Noel not to do this, but again, forgiveness doesn't exist in his dictionary. So she turns to Walter and asks him to do something about it. She knows Walter has a crush on her, so she expects him to save her, but Walter refuses. She starts lashing out at him with every insult she can come up with, and the look on Walter's face is priceless because he never could have imagined she would say such things to him. Now that the deal is done, Noel gives the man his 1 million payment and turns to lead with Walter. After this incident, Walter is left questioning his life choices, and he is seriously considering quitting the whole seeker job. But Noah tells him this wasn't his fault. In this profession, you're going to meet a lot of people, and many of them will be backstabbers. Walter may not be mentally tough and may be slightly dim, but Noel believes he's a gifted warrior, so he wants to continue to fight by his side and rebuild their party together. However, Walter can't bring himself to accept and refuses to live the life of the Seeker after what just happened. Noel understands and accepts Walter's wishes. As Walter is leaving the city, Noel wishes him good luck with his future endeavors and bids him farewell. But as for Walter, he hasn't given up on his dream yet. He is disappointed that his party ended up being dissolved, but he refuses to let this stop him from becoming the strongest. He intends to rebuild the Blue Beyond party and make it stronger than ever before. Noel sat at the designated meeting spot, tapping his foot against the ground and glancing at the empty area around him. He had put out the call for new party members. But so far, the only one who had shown up was Wolf, who was doing his best to be an annoying mosquito buzzing in Noel's ear. Wolf had this talent for turning every situation into a sarcastic commentary, and right now, he was in full swing. Wolf, ever the optimist about his own party, rambled on about how Noel's requirements were like a get-lost sign for aspiring adventurers. Apparently, anyone worth their salt was already holed up in a party that could actually take on the world, or at least the local goblins. Noel tried to focus on the trees and pretend he couldn't hear him, but Wolf had a knack for cutting through even the thickest daydream. After what felt like an eternity of Wolf's unsolicited advice, he suddenly hit Noel with an unexpected proposal. Out of nowhere, he suggested that Noel should just join Lightning Bite. Sure, it was tempting after all. Lightning Bite was known for its legendary lineup of members who could take down bosses like it was a walk in the park. Wolf was right about that, with his flashy sword skills and Lish's precision archery being the stuff of legends. Who wouldn't want to be part of a team that was practically a dream come true for adventurers? Noel's mind started wandering into the realms of what life would be like as part of Lightning Bite. He imagined himself fighting side by side with Wolf, who'd undoubtedly make some ridiculous battle quip right before he charged in. Then there was Lisha, probably perched in a tree somewhere, gracefully sniping enemies while Noel tripped over his own feet. But on the flip side, there was something exhilarating about starting from scratch, hunting for potential new members. Maybe he'd find someone completely unexpected, a rogue with a hidden talent for singing or a mage who could summon snacks. That could make for a memorable adventure. Plus, there was a certain charm in not having to share loot right off the bat. So, as Wolf continued his relentless recruitment campaign, Noel weighed the pros and cons. Joining a well-oiled machine sounded good, but building a party from the ground up had its own appeal. Ultimately, he'd need to figure out whether he wanted to ride the lightning or forge his own path through the wild, chaotic forest of adventuring. It was a classic dilemma: stability or adventure? Decisions. As Wolf kept hammering away at Noel about the perks of joining Lightning Bite, he couldn't resist bringing up the potential financial rewards. "Think of all the loot, Noel. You could be rolling in gold," he exclaimed, eyes gleaming like a kid in a candy store. Noel had to admit, the thought of fattening his coin purse was tempting. Who wouldn't want to stroll through town with enough money to buy the fanciest potions and perhaps a shiny new sword? Meanwhile, the other members of Lightning Bite, who had just shown up, chimed in. Leah, with her usual no-nonsense attitude, told Wolf he really needed to dial down the sales pitch. It was almost comical how quickly she shot down Wolf's enthusiasm like swatting away a pesky fly. The rest of the crew nodded in agreement, making it clear that they appreciated a more laid-back approach to recruitment. In an unexpected turn of events, Noel, feeling a surge of confidence mixed with a dash of mischief, decided to play his card. He turned to Wolf and said he'd agree to join Lightning Bite, but only if he could take the reins as the new leader. The other party members looked at each other, clearly amused by the proposal. To Noel's surprise, they seemed to embrace the idea with an ease that was almost disconcerting. It appeared that the thought of Noel steering the ship didn't bother them one bit. Wolf's jaw dropped. Wait, what? You can't be serious. But the party was nodding, clearly weighing their options. They must have thought that having someone like Noel, with his strategic mind and knack for problem-solving, would only boost their chances against tougher foes. After all, Noel was definitely smarter than Wolf, who had a tendency to lead with his sword rather than his brain. Wolf, ever the proud founder, wasn't about to give up his title that easily, though. Sure, you might have a few more brain cells, but I started this party. You think I'm just going to hand over the leadership like a hot potato? His incredulous laughter echoed through the clearing as the other party members exchanged amused glances. Noel smirked, enjoying the moment. He hadn't exactly anticipated this outcome, but it felt good to have the upper hand, even if just for a moment. Now the real challenge would be proving himself as the leader. He'd have to navigate the dynamics of the group, maintain the camaraderie, and maybe even get Wolf to stop pestering him. A tall order, but then again, it wasn't an adventure without a bit of chaos, was it? Just then, a girl appears behind everyone, startling them because none of them could sense her coming, not even Leah. And she has elf ears. The mysterious girl introduces herself as Alma and says she's here to apply to join Noel's party. Noel sits down with her and begins the interview. First things first, he asks if she's a minor, as he doesn't want to get in any legal trouble with the Empire. Luckily, Alma is 21 years old, so she's old enough to become a seeker. After that, the members of Lightning Bite begin asking all sorts of personal questions, like her hobbies and favorite books, but what Noel really wants to know is her job and rank. Alma answers that she is a C-rank scout, and Noel thinks this is a stroke of luck because he has been looking for a good scout for a while now. But before he accepts her, he has one more question. Why does she want to become a seeker? As the conversation continued, Noel was caught off guard when Alma casually mentioned that she wasn't interested in becoming a seeker. Instead, she had come to see him, Noel, the grandson of the legendary Overd. The way she said it made it sound as if she were meeting a celebrity, which made Noel a bit uncomfortable. It was strange to think of himself in such a light. When he expressed surprise that she knew about his grandfather, Alma shrugged it off. I've never met Overd myself, she clarified. But my grandpa had a bit of a history with him. They fought years ago, and let's just say it didn't end well for him. He lost his right arm. Noel's stomach dropped. Great, just what he needed. Here he was, trying to carve out his own identity, and now he was suddenly a walking reminder of a past duel that cost someone an arm. He half expected Alma to pull out a grudge list next, ready to settle a score that had been brewing for generations. But Alma quickly dismissed his concerns. I'm not into intergenerational grudges, she said, rolling her eyes. My grandpa's dead now anyway, so it's not like I'm here for revenge or anything. I just wanted to see what the grandson of a legendary hero is like. You know, curiosity and all that. Noel felt a mix of relief and confusion. It seemed absurd that she was just here for a casual meetup. Did she expect him to regale her with tales of his grandfather's glory days? He couldn't even muster the courage to talk to anyone without tripping over his own words, let alone embody the legacy of a renowned hero. So what did you expect? Noel asked, trying to lighten the mood. Did you think I'd be swinging swords or rescuing townsfolk left and right? Alma laughed, shaking her head. Honestly, I didn't know what to expect. Maybe a brooding hero type? But here you are just what he wanted to hear. The grandson of a legendary hero was officially reduced to a just you situation. Still, it was oddly refreshing to meet someone who didn't have expectations or motives tied to his lineage. Maybe, just maybe, this encounter wouldn't end in disaster after all. Noel is curious and asks who her grandpa was. Alma answers that his name was Alor Udar. The entire bar goes silent at the mention of that name, as Alor is famous for being the head of the Society of Assassins. He would kill any target at a client's request, as long as he was sufficiently compensated, so he was known as the strongest assassin. One of the bar regulars gets offended that Alma would claim to be related to a man as legendary as Alor, and doesn't believe a word of what she said, calling her out. Wolf tells the regular to back down, but he's already fired up. He tells Alma that there's an unspoken rule among Seekers. You have to go to the right bar for your rank, otherwise you'll get beaten up by the bar regulars. Alma has never heard of such a rule, probably because Logan is the only one who follows it, as he loves getting the chance to beat people up. She interrupts Logan's rant and asks Noel a question. What determines a Seeker's rank? Noel tells her that your rank is usually determined by the kind of jobs you take or by the skill you display. Alma understands now that if she wants to prove she is strong enough to be here, all she has to do is take Logan down. Logan is enraged that she thinks she can beat him and tries to punch her, but she vanishes right before his eyes. In a matter of seconds, Logan is knocked out. After what he just saw, Noel jumps up and hires Alma immediately. However, Alma is now hungry from all the energy she wasted beating Logan up, so Noel takes her out and buys her a snack. Alma is astounded by how tasty the bun is, and Noel finds this strange since she shouldn't be so excited over regular buns, but she never got to eat anything as good as this while living up in the mountains. Hearing that she has spent all of her life in the mountains, Noel finds it easier to believe that she is really the granddaughter of Allure. Alma is a little upset that Noel didn't believe her until now, but she still believed him when he said he was Overd's grandson. Her grandpa had warned her never to fight Overd under any circumstances because the man wouldn't hesitate to cheat in any manner necessary to win. When she looks at Noel, his eyes make her feel like he would do the same thing. Noel asks if she spent her time in the mountains training to become an assassin, and Alma confirms it. She has to rank up from a scout to an assassin, and while she hasn't ranked up yet, she meets the requirements to be classified as a B-rank scout. If that's the case, Noel asks why she hasn't already joined the Assassin Society since she is more than qualified. Alma had intended to do just that, but when she was taking the entrance exam, there was a bit of an incident. She was asked to fight one of their assassins, but she was disappointed because her opponent wasn't as strong as she had hoped. The guy was offended that she called him weak, so as the match started, he went at her with full force. However, after all his big talk, he missed every single punch he threw and ended up on the ground. Alma then held a knife to his head, and the guy began pleading for his life, saying this was just an exam and that killing isn't allowed. Those were maybe the rules, but Alma simply doesn't care because her grandpa taught her that only the strong can survive, so all weaklings must die. Just before she stabs the guy, her blade gets caught, and she's forced to back away because Simon, the new head of the Assassin Society, refuses to let her kill one of his people. After that, Alma is rejected from the Assassin Society for obvious reasons. The society approves of her skills, but they can't allow her to join because of her murderous tendencies. They don't want to deal with her. Apparently, the Assassin Society is in the process of being officially recognized as an organization by the royal family, so they will be focusing mainly on spy work instead of assassinations, and they need to keep a clean record to do that. It takes a second for Noel to realize that Alma just shared a national secret with him, and he worries that the society might send assassins to shut him up because of it. However, he thinks it's fine since she can probably protect him if it comes to that, although that doesn't make him feel any better. There's nothing he can do about it now. The next morning, Noel and Alma set off into the forest for some teamwork training, sunlight filtering through the leafy canopy. As they made their way deeper into the woods, Noel couldn't help but wonder how much Alma knew about talkers like him. He asked her if she had any insights on the subject, but she admitted that her understanding was limited. She knew that talkers typically lacked combat prowess but excelled in support roles. Noel felt a sense of validation in her words, but also wanted to convey the complexities of his abilities. He explained that while it was true talkers were primarily support-focused, their skills could be intricately layered. For instance, he had access to an ability called Assault Command, which could dramatically enhance his teammates' strength, allowing them to finish a fight in one decisive blow. However, using that ability at the wrong moment could lead to disastrous consequences, potentially wiping out the entire party. This reality required him to maintain constant awareness of the battlefield, evaluating positions, stamina, and enemy movements to make the best decisions. It was a heavy burden, one that required both tactical thinking and quick reflexes. As they moved through the forest, they engaged in various training exercises that highlighted these principles. Noel demonstrated how to use his support abilities effectively, boosting Alma's agility just enough to help her evade imagined threats. Each successful maneuver built her confidence, and he felt a sense of accomplishment watching her grow. The forest echoed with the sounds of their training, the rustle of leaves, the thud of wooden weapons clashing, and the rhythm of their movements. As they practiced, Noel realized he was forging not just skills, but a genuine partnership. This training was more than just preparation. It was an opportunity to define his own identity, separate from his grandfather's legacy, and carve out a path of his own. However, there's a drawback. As a talker, he can't use buffs on himself, so he isn't meant to fight. Of course, that hasn't stopped him so far. To begin her training, Noel tells Alma he wants her to capture a monster in these woods. Although it's not as dangerous as the ones in the abyss, it is still a big enough threat that it needs to be eliminated. He's talking about the killer rabbits. Alma thinks they're really cute, but Noel reminds her that these things are still dangerous. He wants her to catch a killer rabbit with one of his buffs active on her. Alma approached their training with a sense of confidence, believing that mastering the exercises should be straightforward. However, she maintained that she didn't need Noel's help to succeed. While it was true that she was more than capable on her own, Noel understood that the real benefit of his support abilities lay beyond simply boosting her strength. He wanted her to recognize that using a buff effectively required more than just raw power. It involved a level of training and adaptation. Alma had a skill called Excel that doubled her speed and could stack up to 5 times, but she couldn't unleash that full potential right away. If she tried to use it at maximum power without proper preparation, the rapid acceleration would likely result in serious injuries, broken bones and torn muscles, to be exact. Noel's buffs could amplify her capabilities even further, but without the necessary foundation, they could also lead to disastrous consequences. It was essential for her to train her body to handle the strain that came with such enhancements. He understood that pushing limits could lead to breakthroughs, but only when done safely and methodically. As they practiced, Noel guided her through movements that would help her build the necessary strength and endurance to maximize her skills. Each session was an opportunity for Alma to recognize the importance of preparation and adaptation in the art of combat. The training was designed to ensure that when the time came to use her abilities, and perhaps his buffs, she would be ready to unleash her full potential without risking injury. This wasn't just about making her stronger in the moment, it was about cultivating a deeper understanding of her body's limits and how to expand them responsibly. With each exercise, they were laying the groundwork for future battles, ensuring that when the stakes were high, Alma would be able to rely on both her skills and Noel's support without fear of overwhelming herself. They were out in the forest to test Alma's capacity to handle the pressures of enhanced abilities. Noel recalled how his former party, despite being exceptionally skilled, had taken 6 months of rigorous training to effectively utilize his buffs. Now, with Alma's performance at stake, he was eager to see if she could rise to the challenge and prove that they were ready to continue as a team. Confident in her abilities, Alma assured him she could handle whatever Noel had planned. He challenged her further by asking if she could sense any killer rabbits lurking nearby. To her surprise, there were indeed rabbits in the area. With a smirk, Noel activated his tactician skill, the air around them buzzing with potential. "Use your Excel skill at maximum capacity," he instructed, knowing that as long as she followed his orders precisely, the effectiveness of her ability would be amplified. He explained the objective. She needed to capture one of the bunnies and bring it back to him within 10 seconds. It was a straightforward task, but one that would require her to push her limits. Alma focused, tapping into her Excel skill. With a burst of speed, she took off into the underbrush, moving with the swiftness of a striking predator. Noel watched intently, his heart racing as he observed how she navigated the terrain. The forest came alive with her energy as she darted through the trees, her determination evident. As the seconds ticked by, Noel felt a mix of anticipation and concern. He knew that this test was more than just a whimsical exercise. It was a crucial moment to gauge whether Alma was truly ready to handle the pressures of their dynamic. He believed in her potential, but the reality of combat could be unforgiving. Alma's movements were fluid, her instincts sharp. She spotted a rabbit, poised and ready to bolt. With her speed doubled, she closed the distance, her focus unwavering. Noel held his breath, counting down the moments as she lunged to capture the creature. If she succeeded, it would signify not just her ability to follow instructions, but her readiness to engage with the complexities of teamwork and enhanced skills. The forest echoed with the rustling of leaves and the faint sound of paws on the ground as Alma made her move. Noel was determined to see how this would unfold, knowing that their partnership hinged on this very test. Alma activated her acceleration skill, and in the blink of an eye, she was off, zipping through the forest like a streak of lightning. The world around her blurred as she raced, the thrill of newfound speed sending adrenaline coursing through her veins. She was astonished by how much faster she felt compared to her usual pace, moving with an agility that seemed almost supernatural. In what felt like no time at all, she returned to Noel, breathless but exhilarated, carrying not just one but all 13 rabbits she had caught. Noel's eyes widened in disbelief. She hadn't just completed the task, she had utterly exceeded his expectations. Not only had she utilized the buffs effectively, but she had done it all in a mere 8 seconds. With this impressive display, Noel felt a surge of confidence in Alma's abilities. It was clear she didn't need any further training to make the most of her skills. Excited by their success, he suggested they take their first job as a party. He had the perfect mission in mind, one that would put their talents to the test. A letter from a former client had arrived, detailing a gang of thieves that had been terrorizing the village of Mince. Alma's eyes lit up at the prospect of their first job together. The thought of confronting a gang of thieves was thrilling, and she could feel the anticipation bubbling inside her. As Noel explained the plan, they discussed the logistics of traveling by stagecoach to reach the village. Alma was particularly excited about this aspect, as she had never ridden in one before. The idea of bouncing along the road in a stagecoach, embarking on their first adventure together, filled her with glee. She envisioned the scenic views they would encounter and the tales they would share during the journey. This was more than just a job, it was the start of their journey as a team, and she couldn't wait to see what lay ahead. As they prepared for the trip, Noel felt a sense of purpose solidifying between them. They were ready to face whatever challenges the thieves would throw their way, and together, they would forge their own legacy. Noel warns her that it's going to be a long and boring ride, so he plans to tell her about the work a seeker can take on. Seekers aren't limited to quests in the abyss. They can also hunt monsters, criminals, treasure, and even explore mystic lands. The gang of thieves they're heading to deal with wouldn't usually be a problem for the local lord, but with all the bureaucracy, the village would have been destroyed by the time any official help arrived. That's why Noel was hired to help. However, since the village is pretty poor, he isn't expecting to receive much of a reward, but it'll be a good chance to see how Alma does in actual combat. After a long coach ride, they arrive in the town of Eudora, and Alma's butt is stiff from all the sitting, so she never wants to ride in a stagecoach again. For now, Noel suggests they find an inn to stay at for the night, but everywhere they go, all the rooms are booked. Eventually, they end up sharing a single room because it's all that's available. Noel tells Alma that she can have the bed while he sleeps on the floor, but Alma doesn't see why they can't just share the bed. She finds it really cute that Noel gets embarrassed about things like this. Not wanting to discuss it further, Noel walks away to take a bath. While he's gone, Alma starts doing some stretches. When Noel exits the bath, she stands up straight and begins admiring his perfectly formed muscles. She thinks he has an amazing physique, but it's a shame that he's just a talker. If he were a warrior like Overd, he could have become the ultimate seeker. No matter how much hard work he puts in, he will never outclass those with natural talent, and Alma is disappointed because she would have loved to see what heights he could reach. Noel doesn't let her comments get to him and flicks her on the forehead for saying unnecessary things. But while Alma is taking her bath, he reflects on what she said, knowing she is right. He wanted to be a warrior like his grandpa more than anything. But life didn't give him what he wanted, so he has to deal with the class he got. Once they finally arrived in the village, the chief stepped out to greet them, a mix of surprise and confusion on his face. It quickly became clear that he expected more than just 2 travelers. Noel, ever the smooth talker, launched into an explanation about how his other party members had to bow out for various reasons, artfully omitting the juicy details about him inadvertently selling them off. The Blue Beyond party now consisted solely of Noel and Alma, and he was determined to make it work. They settled into the chief's living room, a cozy space filled with rustic charm. Think mismatched furniture, colorful woven rugs, and a faint smell of something that might have once been a stew. Noel tried to adopt a serious demeanor as he assured the chief they were more than capable of handling any pesky thieves causing trouble. Alma nodded, though her expression suggested she was secretly plotting how to escape if things went south. As they sat down, Noel's eyes caught a flicker of movement behind a curtain. The chief's daughter was peeking through, her wide eyes filled with curiosity. It was hard to tell whether she was fascinated or horrified at the sight of them. Noel, feeling a bit bold, gave a friendly wave, but she vanished behind the curtain as if a ghost had just appeared. He chuckled to himself, pondering how a simple greeting could send someone scurrying away like a startled cat. The meeting continued, with Noel attempting to maintain focus while visions of the chief's daughter danced in his head. He imagined all sorts of scenarios, her boldly declaring her love for adventurers, or maybe even sneaking out to join their quest. But reality reigned as the chief laid out the details of the situation. He described the thieves with the flair of a seasoned storyteller, complete with wild hand gestures and an exaggerated frown. Noel nodded along, mentally drafting a battle strategy that mostly involved running really fast if things got dicey. Alma, meanwhile, sat quietly, occasionally snorting at Noel's over-the-top expressions. It was clear that while their situation was serious, it didn't mean they couldn't have a laugh about it later. After all, a little humor could be the best weapon against danger, even if it was just to distract them from the fact that their party had shrunk significantly. The chief apologizes for his daughter's rude behavior and explains that she was actually really looking forward to seeing him. But Noel just wants to discuss the details of the mission. According to the letter he received, there's a band of around 20 thieves in the area, and they've already attacked one of the neighboring villages, so this village might be their next target. Noel asks if there are any clues as to the thieves' base, and the chief reveals that he has managed to scout it out. The thieves are in a rocky clearing in the eastern part of the forest. With the information provided, Noel shouldn't have any trouble locating them. Before he goes, he wants to discuss compensation. The chief's letter offered $200,000 up front and $300,000 once the job is completed. But before Noel is even done speaking, the chief's wife brings out the upfront $200,000, and the chief promises to pay the rest upon completion of the quest. Noel is surprised since he was fully expecting them to start bargaining on the price, and from the coins in the bag, it looks like the chief just barely managed to scrape this money together. He must be really desperate. With the upfront payment in hand, Noel and Alma head out to complete the mission. As they walk, Alma tells Noel that the chief was staring at her cleavage the entire time they were talking, right in front of his wife and daughter, so she thinks very little of him. Just then, the chief's daughter comes running up behind them. She wants to talk to Noel since she was too nervous to do it back at the house. She shows him her toy, and Noel recognizes it as the one he gave her the last time he was in the village. The girl has treasured it ever since because she really likes Noel. She doesn't have much else to say but promises to cook something delicious for him once he gets back from the mission. Noel says he is looking forward to it, and Alma finds the whole interaction funny, as Noel actually seems to have a sweet side. But he doesn't want to hear about it. Later that night, they finally make it to the thieves' camp. Noel is shocked to see that there are well over 40 thieves instead of the 20 he expected. He quickly identifies the leader of the group, who looks awfully familiar. Noel soon realizes it's none other than Goro the Razor Blade, a man with a 2 million Phil bounty on his head. Since he is a rank scout, Noel asks Alma if she's confident she could beat him. Alma is sure she could win in a proper one-on-one, but not so much if she has to deal with all of Goro's henchmen at the same time. Noel expected that answer, so he says he has a plan to handle all the henchmen. Alma is surprised that Noel intends to fight alongside her because if he gets any closer than he already is, the bandits will be able to detect him. Although Alma can get as close as she wants because she has a stealth skill, Noel tells her to stop talking and just focus on following his instructions. So she does as she is told and jumps into the camp with her stealth skill active. Noel and Alma are able to maintain communication because one of Noel's skills, Link, which allows him to share his thoughts with his teammates. Before long, Alma makes it to Gordo's tent and informs Noel that she's within striking distance. So Noel uses Stun Howl in the entire camp, causing all the henchmen to freeze up temporarily. The second everyone is stunned, Noah orders Alma to kill Gordo. So with her quintuple acceleration, she charges into the tent and immediately stabs him through the heart. Now that Gordo is dead, all that's left is to take care of the remaining bandits. So Noel orders Alma to keep them busy until he can get down there. And she begins slaughtering the soldiers in her immediate vicinity. As Noel descends the hill, he notices that Alma seems to be enjoying this a little too much, and her murderous tendencies might become a problem for him someday. But that day is not today, so he joins her in combat and uses his fire bullet to burn the rest of the thieves to a crisp. Once the mission is complete, the two of them head back to the village and are greeted by the village chief, who says he is glad they are alive. He asked about the situation with the thieves, and Noel informs him that they have all been dealt with, offering their leader's head as proof. But the village chief says he doesn't need to see the severed head since he has completed the mission. Noel asks for the rest of his payment, and the chief says he will give it to him. But first, he invites him to have dinner with them since his daughter, Chelsea, has been looking forward to it. As Noel and Alma sit down with the family, the chief tells Noel about how Chelsea was recently evaluated as a swordsman. So Chelsea asks Noel if she thinks she can become a seeker like him. Noel tells her that anyone can become a seeker, although there is usually a training camp where you have to go to learn the ropes. But alternatively, Chelsea could work as a supporter for an established seeker and gain experience that way. But as he is saying this, the chief and his wife have a look on their face that says they are up to no good. A little while later, Chelsea asks Noel if he will allow her to join his party if she becomes a powerful seeker in the future. And Noel says if she becomes powerful in the future and still looks up to him, he will be more than happy to accept her into his party. And Chelsea is really excited to hear that. Just then, the chief and his wife come back to the living room with a bottle of wine, and he says he wants to celebrate. So he pours a glass of his very expensive bottle of wine for both Noel and Alma. However, after inspecting the wine a little, Noel says he couldn't possibly take the first sip of such high-quality wine, so he insists that the chief take the first sip. The chief starts panicking and tries to make up an excuse for why he can't drink it. But Noel still insists that he sip the wine first because he knows that the chief poisoned it. The chief tries to deny poisoning the wine, but Noel has a lot of reasons for his accusation. First, the chief clearly lied about there being only 20 thieves so you wouldn't have to pay as much. And someone who would do that would never open such an expensive bottle of wine for guests. Secondly, the wine isn't even expensive. Noel can tell by the smell that it's the cheapest wine possible and that it was opened a long time ago. And finally, there has been a distinct bloodlust coming from the chief and his wife ever since they brought out that bottle of wine. Alma calls the man stupid for thinking they would fall for such an obvious murder attempt. Plus, the poison wouldn't have worked anyway since Alma is immune to all sorts of poisons. The chief gets angry and claims that they have no evidence. But if he is still denying that he poisoned the wine, then Noel says he should have no issues drinking it. The village chief throws a tantrum and yells for Noel to get out of his village immediately. But Noel just uses his confession skill on him and forces the chief to admit that he intended to poison them so he wouldn't have to pay Noel and then steal all their money and equipment. Chelsea can't believe her father was really trying to kill Noel. But now that Noel has heard the confession, he immediately jumps up and stabs the chief in the eye with his thumb. The chief yells out in pain, but Noel is nowhere near done because he's going to take out the chief's other eye, and after that, his nose and then his tongue. The chief begs for forgiveness, but forgiveness is the last thing Noel would ever hand out, especially not to someone who tried to kill him. He tells the chief that if he wants to survive, then he's going to have to give Noel every last penny he has. The chief pleads with Noel not to take his money because he has debts to repay, and the Gambino Mafia family will do terrible things to him if he misses a payment. And that's sad and all, but does Noel look like he gives a frick? He's about to go through with it, but at the last second, Chelsea brings out the bag with all the money they have in the house, which is around $800,000, and she tells Noel he can have it. So you should please let her father go. The chief yells at her because if they lose that money, the Gambino family might kill them. But if Chelsea doesn't give that money to Noel, then Noel will definitely kill the chief right now. Noel accepts the money, and after making sure there's enough, he tells Alma that they are leaving. But as he leaves, Chelsea curses Noel and all other seekers for what he has done, which stings a little since she looked up to him a few minutes ago. But it is what it is. As Noel and Alma are walking away, Alma asks Noel if he's okay with how things ended up. But he's got his money and the chief was the one in the wrong, so he can live with being hated for his ruthlessness. A little while later, they see an airship pass overhead, and from the insignia on the bottom, Noel recognizes they belong to the Goat Clan, the 3-star regalia. Alma thinks it's cool, but she doesn't really know what regalia means, so Noel explains that it means the clan has been recognized by the Empire. There are currently 7 regalia stars, and not all of them are equal because there are various levels of strength between them. The last 4 are at the bottom. The 3rd and 2nd are relatively equal, but only the most powerful clan earns the 1-star regalia title. One of the benefits of being recognized as a regalia is that it comes with the rights to your own personal airship. And the seekers who manage to earn this title are top of the line in strength, intelligence, wealth, and experience. Noel has already made the decision that by this time next year, he will become strong enough to be recognized as a regalia. Seeing the determination in Noel's eyes, Alma thinks back to the day she was rejected by the Assassin Society. She asked Simone if she did well enough, and Simone told her that her combat prowess was indeed extraordinary, but that didn't mean she passed. He says he has a simple question for her, so he asks if Alma was the one who killed Allure, the former Assassin Association leader, and she answers that she did it. Even though he was the god of assassins, he became a sitting duck in his insanity. Allure was a truly terrifying man, and he still could never defeat Overdeath, and that fact ate away at his mind until it drove him crazy. Alma is actually the daughter of Allure and a random woman he kidnapped, and she wasn't the only one either. Allure had many children, but he never wanted to raise a child. He wanted to raise an assassin that could become his successor. So he forced all his children to fight amongst themselves to the death, until Alma was the only one left alive. Simone understands the situation that led Alma to become this way, but she simply isn't a good fit for the assassin society. Alma couldn't believe she was being rejected even though she passed the test. But Simone told her that physical strength wasn't the only criterion. That was 21 years of her life that were wasted, so what is she supposed to do now? Simone tells her she's free to live her life however she wants, but if she is looking for something to do, he informs her that the grandson of Overdieth is a seeker as well, and even though he is just a talker, he is still considerably strong. If she is intrigued, then she should head to ELA if she wants to meet him. That was exactly what Alma did, and right now she's really glad she did because she's found a new purpose in life and swears to fight by Noel's side forever. In a high-security prison, one of the guards has just been knocked out in the bathroom, and the assailant transforms into a perfect copy of the guard to take his place. He goes to the guard's post, and the guard's partner is none the wiser to the switch. The impersonator plays the part and asks which prisoner they are guarding, and his partner begins talking about the heinous murders the guy in there, the puppeteer, committed. And the puppeteer is exactly who the impersonator was looking for. Every morning, Noel wakes up and begins his training routine of 2 laps around the castle walls with a ton of rocks on his back. He gives himself a 2-hour time limit, and he never skips it, no matter what. His training was drilled into him by his grandfather. The same day, Noel decided that he wanted to become a seeker, and there was no easy way to accomplish it. Talkers like Noel aren't able to buff themselves, so his only option was to get buffed naturally, which is why he trains relentlessly every day. After he's done with his morning routine, Noel takes a shower and thinks about what Alma told him a couple of days ago. No matter how hard he trains his body, he will never be able to achieve the level of power that comes with being born with talent. Just then, there's a knock at the door, and it turns out to be Alma, so Noel lets her in, and she's impressed with how nice Noel's room is. They had planned to meet today, but Alma wasn't supposed to arrive for another couple of hours, which is why Noel isn't ready yet. Alma teases him, saying she'd be happy that she showed up earlier. After seeing Noel's peak physique, she says she's going to touch him. Before Noel has a chance to react, Alma pushes him onto the bed, and even though she sees herself as his big sister, it's not stopping her from trying to kiss Noel. Noel tries to get her off of him, but Alma has natural scout strength, so he resorts to his only option to get out of this without his lips being tainted and headbutts Alma. A little while later, Alma realizes she may have gone too far, but she still doesn't think Noel should have headbutted her. However, she did assault him, so Noel believes it was perfectly justified. Alma still hasn't given up on getting affection from Noel though, so she grabs his arm and declares that this is now a date. Noel is sick of her antics, so he just plays along and says the first place they are going is the Appraisal Guild. Appraisers are a unique class possessed by a subset of gnomes, and it's literally all they do. Noel and Alma arrive in the appraisal hall, and before their turn comes up, Noel asks Alma what she's going to do. She already meets the qualifications for a rank up, as evidenced by the mark on her chest. The mark automatically shows up on your body once you meet the requirements, so Noel wants to know if she's still going to become an assassin. Alma hasn't really decided on it yet, so she asks Noel what he thinks she should do, but he isn't sure either. An assassin build would definitely help with combat, but he doesn't want to commit to anything right away in order to avoid skill redundancy with future recruits. Alma didn't know Noel still intended to recruit more people into their team, and she's kind of jealous, but Noel explains that it would be far too reckless for them to go into an abyss with only 2 party members, so he just wants to get Alma praised so he can see what her options are and plan accordingly. After they are done with the appraisal, Noel and Alma head back out, and this time, Noel says they are going to a blacksmith shop that's run by a dwarf. Good equipment draws out the full potential of the seeker, so they must get their gear maintained regularly. Noel knows the blacksmith, and he seems to have a good relationship with him, so the blacksmith greets him back. The blacksmith notices Alma and assumes she must be a new member of Noel's party, so he starts assessing her to see what equipment she could use, but then he gets distracted by Alma's melons. After that, Noel takes Alma to a skill bookshop so she can pick up some useful skills guides. He talks to the owner and tells her to help Alma pick out some appropriate skills while he's gone. Alma asks where Noel is going, so he explains that this store only carries skill books made for scouts, so he needs to go to another store to get talker skill books for himself. Before he leaves, he turns back and reminds Alma that she only has a budget of 1 million for her skill books, and under no circumstances should she waste that money. Alma agrees to Noel's terms, but the second she's left alone, she buys herself a giant teddy bear. Noel is angry at her for wasting money and at himself for trusting her. But Alma says she didn't waste all the money. She actually got a really good skill book called Armor Piercing, and with it she's able to cut her opponent's defenses in half. The book cost her 800,000, and she used the leftover money to get the bear as a substitute. Since Noel won't let her hug him anymore, overall, she thinks it was a successful shopping trip. But then, she notices that Noel didn't buy anything for himself. She asks why, so he explains that the skill book he wanted to buy was too far out of budget for him to consider getting. The book was one for exorcism, and a skill like that would allow him to instantly wipe out undead monsters. But the skill book costs 30 million, and he can't afford that. Just then, he notices someone walked by, so he gets up and tells Alma to go ahead and start eating without him. He follows the guy into a back alley, and once there's no one else around, the man reveals himself to Noel. This is Loki, and he is the shapeshifter from earlier who infiltrated the prison. Noel commissioned him to do investigation regarding the puppeteer that's locked up in there, and Loki did not disappoint. He hands over the info he gathered, and while it's none of his business what Noel does, he asks if Noel is sure about recruiting the puppeteer into his team. After all, the man once shook the entire capital with his power. But that's precisely why Noel wants to recruit him. Besides, he is fairly certain that the puppeteer was framed for the crimes, which is why he hired Loki to investigate so he can prove the puppeteer's innocence. Loki understands Noel's plan, but it's weird hearing the guy who sold his former teammates as office slaves talk about rescuing a death row inmate. If nothing else, Noel has to be a little crazy to go from one to the other so quickly, and he takes pride in that. After checking Loki's report, Noel commends him for a job well done. But things like this are a natural talent for Loki, since his imitator class allows him to take on the form of any person. So there's no place safe from his infiltration. Noel pays him for the work he has done and asks Loki to keep investigating. But before he leaves, Loki tells Noel he has some bonus intel for him. He lets Noel know that there has been a nasty drug being sold in these parts, and it's said to be better than anything else on the market. But it causes immense fits of rage, so violent crime in the area has increased. Noel wonders who would be crazy enough to sell something like that, since the Luciano's family would surely put a stop to it once they find out. However, the group selling the drug is actually a subdivision of the Luciano's family, so it's not likely that anything will be done about the drug. The ones in charge of this territory are the Gambinos, and their leader, Albert Gambino, is a real nut job. Back on Alma's end, she's upset that Noel left her alone for so long, so she's trying to cheer herself up with food. But just then, an old friend of hers happens to walk by. Meanwhile, Noel is walking through the Gambino territory, and he is quite disappointed with the current state of the place. The former leader of the Gambino family was a good man, so much so that even Finocchio respected him. But when the former leader died, his son Albert took over, and this place went to hell under his rule. As Noel is walking, he notices a man sitting by the side of the road, and the man looks a lot different from the people of this kingdom. So Noel assumes he must be an immigrant. However, with his current state, he's probably going to die as a beggar before long. Noel feels bad for him, so as he passes by, he drops a coin for the man. But as he does this, the man gets up and hands him back his coin, thinking Noel must have accidentally dropped it. And he tells Noel that this place isn't safe for a cute girl like him. Noel is offended that the man thinks he's a girl, so he turns to him and makes it clear that he's a guy. And as for the coin, he would never take it back after a filthy beggar like him touched it. He begins walking away, but now the man feels offended, so he tries grabbing Noel's shoulder. However, Noel kicks him square in the stomach and sends him flying backwards. He tells the man that he shouldn't try to touch him with his worthless hands. But the way Noel is looking down on him now reminds the man of someone else he used to know, and he refuses to let that slide. He usually doesn't like fighting over things like this, but he's not so weak that he can't stand up for himself. As the man takes his battle stance, Noel realizes that this guy looks like he is really skilled with a sword. And as he charges Noel, his sword strike has Noel fearing for his life. Noel manages to dodge, but the man continues to attack him relentlessly until Noel finally grabs the guy's arm and sends him flying into a random building. After he gets back up, the man admits that Noll is pretty capable as a fighter, so he asks him if he's a ninja class. The ninja class was known to be exclusive to an island in the Far East, so Noll deduced that this guy must hail from there. He decided to downplay his own abilities, casually mentioning that he was just a talker. The man's eyes widened in disbelief. It seemed he hadn't encountered a talker who could fight so well before. But Noll brushed that off, knowing it wouldn't matter much in the long run. This guy would be using his skills for Noll's benefit from now on. When Noll got a good look at the man's aura, he couldn't help but grin. It was vibrant and powerful, indicating that this guy was definitely strong. The potential was clear. If he could meet Noll's expectations in the ring, there was no doubt he would be a valuable addition to the party. Noll envisioned the possibilities, strategies, fights, and victories, his excitement building. But just as they were about to dive into serious combat, the atmosphere shifted abruptly. Out of nowhere, a munchkin stormed onto the scene, eyes blazing with indignation. He zeroed in on Koga, berating him for getting into a fight without permission. The munchkin's voice was shrill, cutting through the tension like a knife, and it was clear he wasn't interested in hearing any excuses. Noll raised an eyebrow, momentarily taken aback. He had been ready to unleash chaos, and now here was this little whirlwind demanding order. It was almost comical, the contrast between the intensity of the situation and the unexpected interruption. The munchkin seemed to believe he was the one in charge, and Noll couldn't help but wonder how this was all going to play out. Would they still get to fight? Would the munchkin somehow become an obstacle? As the munchkin continued to lecture, Noll exchanged glances with Koga, a silent communication passing between them. This wasn't how he'd envisioned the day going, but then again, adventuring was rarely predictable. If anything, it just added another layer of intrigue to the mix. While that's going on, Alma and her friends sit down to chat, and Alma's friend is surprised that Alma hasn't ranked up yet. Alma tells her she has two main options for her rank up. She could either become an assassin or a chaser, but Noll told her to hold off on making a decision yet. Alma's friend can see why Noll would ask Alma to wait, since chasers and assassins have two totally different roles, so Alma's choice would have to depend on the other team members. In fact, she assumes Noll is probably out recruiting a new member for the party as they speak. And over on Noll's end, the prospective recruit is still being yelled at by the munchkin. The munchkin had told Koga to sit tight and wait for him to return, and he doesn't want to hear any of Koga's excuses, so he uses his ring on Koga until he falls unconscious. Noll recognizes that as an oath of subordination ring, an item that compels someone to obey the wearer of the ring. And normally something like this would be prohibited by law, but it is permitted if it is used between a master and his slave. After Tob has out Cole, the munchkin turns to Noll and asks why he was fighting with Koga. But he also mistakes Noll for a girl, and he's starting to get weird, so Noll kicks him across the street. The munchkin asks why Noll did that, but Noll holds him at gunpoint and says he's the one asking the questions here first. He asks where the munchkin is from, since he doesn't seem like he comes from this town. So the man explains that he is from a place far south called Solderland. And next, Noll asks him why he came to ELA. The man hesitates to answer at first, but the gun motivates him to reveal that he is on the run. He used to work for the Delber family and ran their underground fighting ring, but then he got caught embezzling their funds, and they weren't very happy with him, so he had to flee. He came to ELA because it was the territory of the Lucianos, a strategic choice since the Delumber family wouldn't dare venture into this domain. Koga, one of his slave fighters, had been brought along when he fled, and now the man's eyes gleamed with a mix of desperation and determination. Noll quickly pieced together that the guy likely wanted to use Koga as a ticket into the Aurea underground fighting scene. As the conversation unfolded, the man laid out his plan, his voice laced with urgency. He inquired if Noll had any connections to the underground fighting ring, clearly hoping for a lifeline. But Noll shrugged it off, letting him know he was just a seeker, and just to clarify, he was also a guy. The man's reaction was immediate and explosive. He was shocked not just by Noll's status as a seeker, but even more so that someone with such a pretty face was, in fact, male. Noll felt his temper flare at the remark, a mix of annoyance and indignation bubbling beneath the surface. Who did this guy think he was? But pushing that aside, Noll assessed the situation. The man was on the run from the Delbert family, which meant Noll wouldn't face repercussions if he decided to take matters into his own hands. Plus, if this munchkin were out of the picture, Koga would be free, and Noll could claim him for himself. The benefits of the situation were too good to ignore. With a mental checklist of pros and cons rapidly weighing in his favor, Noel's decision became crystal clear. Without a moment's hesitation, he executed the man, the sound echoing sharply in the otherwise quiet space. There was no time for second thoughts. Opportunities like this didn't come often, and he'd learned long ago that hesitation could cost you everything. As he stood there, the adrenaline coursing through him, Noel felt a mix of satisfaction and resolve. The underground awaited, and he was ready to carve his path. Noel might not have a heart, but he definitely wasn't a murderer, at least not when it came to people he could use later. He'd given the guy a warning shot, just a little reminder that this wasn't a friendly game of tag. It wasn't like he was out here looking to collect bodies. But if the guy had any sense at all, he'd get the hell out of there before Noel decided to turn this into a murder mystery, with him as the leading suspect. 10 seconds. Not much time for a life-changing decision. The guy, understandably, was terrified. He probably never had a gun pointed at his face before. It didn't seem like the kind of thing you get used to, unless of course you were Koga, who was busy kicking Noel's leg like that would do anything. Noel gave him a look that screamed really, and rolled his eyes. If Koga had any kind of backbone, they might have had something resembling a partnership. But no, the dude was too soft, too nice to even off a tiny little munchkin for his own survival. That was the moment Noel knew he couldn't trust him. Weakness was a liability. While Noel would have appreciated having Koga's muscle around in a pinch, there was no point in keeping someone around who couldn't even make a hard choice when it counted. They were gonna run, but Noel was already thinking ahead. If Koga didn't toughen up soon, he'd be the next target on Noel's to-do list. But for now, Noel let him play the hero, let him feel like he was still needed. The clock was ticking after all. A little while later, Noel returned to the cafe, still trying to shake off the weird energy of the day. As soon as he stepped through the door, he noticed Alicia sitting there, casually sipping her drink like she'd been there all day. He didn't remember inviting her, but apparently she'd taken it upon herself to show up anyway. Great, just what he needed, another person to keep track of. He wasn't in the mood for company, especially not hers. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the table, calculating the damage. He wasn't paying for anyone's food. That wasn't part of the deal. The whole everyone can fend for themselves thing worked just fine for him. Then Alon walked over, her arms folded in that way that meant she was about to deliver some righteous indignation. She had that look, the one that said, "You've screwed up." Noel didn't have to be psychic to know she was going to bring up how long he'd been gone, and how lonely Alicia must have been, left to wander the world all by herself in the absence of his presence. Classic guilt trip territory. Noel's instinct was to dig in his heels, but he had learned long ago that fighting Alon on these things was a lost cause. Fine, just this once. He'd treat both of them, but only because the longer he stood there, the more the annoyance of the situation outweighed his need to argue. They both got quiet as he sat down, but that didn't make the decision feel any less like a trap. And just like that, Noel was back to playing the role of reluctant benefactor. Not that he'd ever admit it, but he was starting to wonder if maybe he'd gotten a little soft. Then again, if they thought this was the beginning of a new trend, they were seriously mistaken. Noel took his seat, feeling the weight of the situation settle in. Alicia wasted no time with pleasantries and jumped right in, asking if he'd found any good party members during his little excursion. She seemed to think the long delay was a result of his recruitment efforts. If only it had been that simple. The whole process was more tedious than Noel cared to admit, and so far no one had met his very particular requirements. He wasn't looking for just anyone, and anyone who thought they could join his team without earning it wasn't worth his time. But it wasn't all bad. At least Alicia was keeping things light, even if her assumption was way off. Noel didn't bother explaining the reality of his day. There was no point. He didn't need anyone else to understand his methods or lack thereof. What he needed was to focus on something that actually mattered. He leaned back in his chair, scanning the room for a moment before fixing his gaze back on Alicia. There was no point beating around the bush. He got straight to the point, asking her if she knew anything about the drug that had been making its rounds lately. The one that had been popping up in whispers and rumors. It wasn't just some underground buzz, it was becoming a problem. And Noel was the kind of person who didn't let problems fester. Alicia didn't strike him as the type to get involved in that kind of thing, but sometimes people knew things they didn't advertise. He watched her closely, waiting for her reaction. She didn't seem surprised, which only made him more curious. If anyone had intel, it was probably her, but he wasn't about to make assumptions. Not just yet. The clock was ticking, and Noel had no time to waste. She has heard about it before, but she doesn't know much about it. M tells her that it apparently has a powerful side effect of rage, and it is currently going unchecked, so he wants her to be careful if she comes across it. Alicia is thankful for the advice, but Noel never goes out of his way to show concern for others, so she's a bit shocked he would warn her. Noel says he's just sharing info since he's on good terms with Leah's party. So Alicia thanked him again and got up, since it was about time she returned to the rest of her party. Before she leaves, she invites Alma to join her at a great sweet shop she knows, but not just as a fellow seeker, as a friend. Alma likes the sound of that, but Noel has no intention of becoming best friends forever with Leah, so he tells her to hurry up and leave already. Once Alicia is gone, Noel starts thinking about the situation with that uncontrolled drug. If Alicia had heard rumors about it, then it must have spread outside the capital. Noel hopes it will become a bigger issue than it already is. Meanwhile, the munchkin Miguel has just been captured by Albert Gambino. While normally Albert would want nothing to do with him, the Del Lumbert family wants their revenge for Miguel's treachery, and they ask the Gambino family for help. Miguel is in utter panic because not only has he been caught, but he was caught by Albert, who's a genuine psychopath. He's literally got a display case for the skulls of people he doesn't like. Albert says it would be no fun to just hand Miguel over to the Delbert family, and Miguel starts agreeing with him in an attempt to save himself. He says someone as great as Albert shouldn't have to do something as boring as calling in a bounty for the Delbert family. But his ass-kissing backfires because Albert says he's going to do something that will be a lot of fun. His idea of fun is to skin Miguel alive and turn him into a doll. Miguel freaks out and asks Albert if he's joking, but Albert is dead serious about it. He even intends to skin Koga as well. Koga hears Albert say he's going to skin them alive, but he doesn't really care since he gave up on himself a long time ago. Now he wants his miserable life to end, even if it's by being skinned alive. However, before Albert could bust out the skinning equipment, one of his debt collectors comes in and tells him he's brought someone who failed to pay on time. He turns out to be the chief of the Mitz village. The chief goes on a long-winded rant explaining how he had gathered the money to pay Albert, but an evil seeker named N stole all the money, completely unprovoked. He also says that N specifically called Albert Gambino a bastard, and Albert is outraged by that. He vows that he will make Noel pay for the disrespect he has shown him. As a reward for being so honest, Albert decides to give the chief some more time to repay the loan, but that doesn't mean there won't be penalties for missing the agreed payment deadline. Albert thinks for a second and decides that he will be taking the chief's right arm as compensation for the late payment. The chief is frozen in fear once he hears this. Albert wastes no time and orders Koga to carry out the dismemberment for him. You can tell that Koga is a long swordsman, so it should be easy for him to do it, even if it's just with a stick. Koga hesitates at first, but Miguel begins yelling at him to do as Albert commands. So Koga gets up and is about to go through with it. However, just before he does, Albert tells him to wait a minute because there is something he wants to do first. Albert then grabs a purple drug crystal and chomps down on it to get himself high because violence is always better when he's high out of his mind. Now that he is tasting colors and seeing sound, he permits Koga to chop off the chief's hand. In denial, the chief says there's no way Koga can cut off his hand with a stick, but before he even finishes his sentence, Koga has made his move. A second later, the chief's hand falls off. The chief screams out in agony, and Albert is absolutely loving it. So Miguel tries to use this to his favor and offers to transfer ownership of Koga to Albert in an attempt to get on his good side. And it looks like it works because Albert agrees to take Koga as his own. Now that Koga officially belongs to Albert, he is taken to a separate room so he can change out his rags. And while he does so, we get to see his tragic backstory. His father was a wealthy businessman, and his mother was one of the most beautiful women of the Lambs. So by all indications, they were a happy couple with a blessed life. But then, one day, out of nowhere, Koga's father was attacked and knocked out while his mother was dragged away and had horrible things done to her. By the time Koga's father regained consciousness, he rushed to try and defend his wife, but the damage had already been done. 9 months later, Koga was born, and while his mother did her best to take care of him, Koga's father had grown bitter and resentful over the child. So once she saw the look of disdain he held in his eyes towards her, she couldn't take it anymore and drove a sword through her neck that night. Years passed since then, and Koga's father had become a drunkard from the loss of his wife, but Koga still yearned for fatherly affection, so he tried his best to make himself useful to him. However, the mere sight of Koga would often send his father into a rage, and all the rest of the people in the estate simply wish he had died alongside his mother so they wouldn't have to look at his face. Koga grew up in a household where he was constantly ridiculed, and no one wanted him, and they left a toll on his sense of self-worth. One morning, he woke up and found himself on a boat with no warning, but it didn't take long for him to realize that he must have been sold off as a slave by his family because they didn't want him around. That's where Koga first met Miguel, and the first thing Miguel did was take him down to an illegal fighting ring. And when Koga began dominating the competition, Miguel was really happy and began praising him for doing such a good job. This was the first time Koga had ever received any kind of praise in his life, so he was brought to tears. But he soon realized that Miguel didn't actually care about him. All he cared about was the money he was making off him. Back to the present, Koga is done suiting up, so he is officially sent out on his first mission under the command of Albert. Later that night, Noel heads over to an abandoned church building to meet with Loki, since Loki said he had some important information to give him. Noel has been good to him, so he gives him a warning and says the Gambino family is after Noel's head. He fills Noel in on what happened and explains that the chief of the Mince village lied to Albert Gambino about Noel disrespecting him, and Albert believed it. So he is sending an assassin after Noel. Noel thinks it's stupid for Albert to order a hit on Noel based on such evidence, but Albert is practically a madman, so a sane person could never understand how he operates. Noel wonders how a man like Albert even got into a position where he's the head of the Gambino family, and the answer is nepotism. The former leader of the Gambino family only had one son, so while Albert was already a major mess-up, he inherited the position without having to work for it. Just then, Noel hears the sound of armor clanking against the ground, and that means someone is approaching. So Noel realizes that Loki must have sold him out to the Gambino family. Loki apologizes, but if he didn't agree to do this, the Gambino family would have killed him. So worse comes to worse, he figures he can just flee to another country after this so the Gambino family doesn't continue harassing him. That sounds like a decent plan to Noel, but there's one thing Loki's plan is failing to account for, and that's the fact that nothing is stopping Noel from shooting him right here and now. Although Noel is disappointed that he now has to kill Loki because he really likes having him around, surprisingly, Loki doesn't try to run and is totally fine with Noel shooting him. Noel is confused, so he asks why Loki is giving his life up right now. So Loki explains that he now realizes that it wasn't just Noel who sold out but also his pride as an informant, and he needs to atone for that. Noel sees that Loki is serious about letting himself get shot, so just this once, he decides to forgive him for what he has done. And he tells Loki that he won't have to leave the country to escape the Gambino family either because Noel is personally going to destroy it. Loki is stunned for a moment, but then he begins laughing hysterically because Noel forgiving him is completely out of character for him. However, Loki is grateful to have been given a second chance, so he vows to make it up to Noel later, but for now, he's not much use in a fight, so he leaves. Once Loki is gone, Noel turns to face his attacker and drinks a battle potion in preparation for the fight. A battle potion greatly increases the user's physical ability, but it only lasts 10 minutes, and it takes a toll on Noel's body afterward. Once the attacker steps into view, Noel is shocked to realize that it's Koga, and Koga is equally surprised that the target he was sent to assassinate is Noel Stalin. Noel congratulates Koga for becoming an assassin for the Gambino family since it's a huge step up from a dirty street fighter. Anyway, there aren't going to be any interruptions this time, so Noel suggests they should pick up where they left off last time and point his gun at Koga. But Koga is hesitant to draw his swords. In all honesty, he doesn't want to fight Noel because he still owes him that silver coin, but that doesn't mean he can defy his master's orders, so he still has to fight. But following his pride as a warrior, he formally announces himself as Koga the Slicing Wong Swordsman and challenges Noel to a duel. Noel thinks Koga is dumb for giving away his profession like that, but he also respects the pride Koga has, so he responds and announces himself as well. After that, the fight begins, and Noel fires his gun at Koga, but Koga is too quick for that, so he dodges and appears in front of Noel. However, just before Noel can be slashed, he uses a wire to get himself to safety. Now that Koga isn't weak and starving, his speed and accuracy are far greater than they were when Noel fought him earlier, but Noel still has a plan to defeat him. He fires a flame bullet at Koga, and even though Koga dodges, he gets caught up in the flame. So Noel assumes Koga will take some significant damage from that. Yet Koga emerges unharmed because he cuts the air around him to create a barrier to protect himself from the flames. He then jumps up to confront Noel, and Noel is forced to engage in close combat. So he tries to go for Koga's nuts, but Koga jumps back and yells that nut shots are a cowardly move. It may be cowardly, but this is a life or death fight, so he doesn't care what cheap tricks he has to use. He's going to get the job done. He then reaches into his jacket and pulls out a flashbang to blind Koga. While Koga's vision is disabled, he attempts to take advantage and land a death blow. But before he can do that, Koga uses his special move and launches several slashes at Noel. He then corners Noel on a ledge. Even though Noel attempts to use his stun howl to stop Koga, Koga simply cuts through it, sending Noel crashing down to his doom. Noel lies on the ground, unconscious. When he wakes up, he sees Kuga standing over him, sword raised. Kuga admits he was impressed by Noel's strength and fighting skills. But Noel isn't interested in praise. He wants to know why Kuga hasn't killed him yet. Kuga hesitates. Even though his mission was to kill Noel, he can't bring himself to do it after their intense fight. Noel is mad at Kuga for hesitating. He yells at Kuga and grabs the sword, saying he can't be soft on enemies. If Kuga doesn't kill him, their boss, Albert, definitely will. Kuga is confused. He doesn't understand why Noel is pushing him to kill him. He thinks maybe Noel is worried about others, but Noel laughs and says it's too late. Alma is coming, and she won't let anyone else touch him. Before the fight started, Noel used his link skill to send a message to Alma about his situation, and he's really glad she's here since the battle potion he drank has just worn off, and the side effects have left him immobilized. Alma doesn't really understand the details, but she does know that Kuga attacked Noel. So she asks Noel if it's alright for her to kill him, and Noel tells her to do it. Alma quickly charges at Kuga, her sword aimed straight for him, but Kuga reacts fast and raises his sword to block her strike. At the same time, he begs her not to attack, saying he doesn't want to hurt a woman. Alma finds this funny because she knows she's in control of the fight, but Kuga points out that although she caught him by surprise with her sudden attack, she still didn't manage to land a killing blow. This frustrates Alma, so she decides to push her abilities further and uses her acceleration skill to move so fast that Kuga can barely keep up. She wants to show him just how much stronger she is. However, Kuga isn't easily outmatched. He activates his sense enhancement skill, which helps him react much quicker, even when his eyes are closed, allowing him to keep up with Alma's speed and avoid being hit. The battle between them becomes even more intense as they each push their limits, with neither willing to give up. As the two continue to battle, Noel is once again reminded of the fact that, as a talker, he will never be able to do things like Alma and Kuga can. But it just reignites his motivation to overcome the strong and become the strongest. So far, Alma and Kuga have fought each other to a standstill, and Alma admits that Kuga is stronger than she gave him credit for, but she's going to make sure she finishes him off with her next poisonous attack. Since she's getting serious, Kuga decides to embrace gender equality and prepares his insta-kill slash to one-shot Alma. However, before either of them can attack the other again, Noel fires a flare into the sky and tells Alma to retreat. Alma doesn't want to, but this is an order, not a request, so she begrudgingly agrees to back off. Noel tells Kuga he has to leave as well since that flare he fired will draw the attention of the military police, and Albert will be really angry if the Imperial government finds out what he's trying to do here. As much as Kuga doesn't want to walk away empty-handed, he has no choice but to listen to what Noel says. But before he leaves, Noel calls him back and says he has a message he wants Kuga to pass on to Albert. The next day, Kuga goes back to Albert to report that he didn't succeed in killing Noel. To Kuga's surprise, Albert takes it pretty calmly, almost like it's no big deal. He even hands Kuga a box, and inside it is Miguel's head. But Albert doesn't seem upset at all. Instead, he just tells Kuga that he's in a good mood and will forgive him for failing this time. However, Albert warns him that if he fails again, there will be serious consequences. Kuga promises that he won't fail a second time and that he'll get the job done no matter what it takes. Albert seems satisfied with Kuga's determination and, feeling reassured, tells him to leave and get ready for the next attempt. But before Kuga leaves, he remembers that Noel gave him a message for Albert. "Albert Gambino, I'm going to take down your entire organization and send your ass to the Gulag." Albert calmly asks if Kuga is telling the truth or if he's lying as the chief of Mint did, but there isn't a hint of deceit on Kuga's face. So Albert starts tweaking out, and now he wants Noel to die even more. Kuga and Albert's bodyguard, Laios, both leave Albert's office to let him cool down, and as they walk away, Laios tells Kuga that he may have taken it a little too far with what he said. So Kuga apologizes. Laios asks if he said that because he had Miguel killed, but Kuga pretty much hated Miguel anyway, so he would have no reason to care that he died. The real reason Kuga feels like he has to deliver Noel's message is because he really admires him. Even though Noel is just a talker and doesn't have the natural strength of a fighter, he works so hard that he is able to go up against someone like Kuga. Kuga knows that the kind of training Noel must have gone through wasn't easy, and he can tell it must have been painful. But even with all that effort, Kuga believes there's no way Noel can beat someone like him. No matter how much he trains, a talker can never be as strong as a combat class fighter. But even though Noel is limited, he still has this fire in his eyes, a determination that no matter what, he will become the strongest person in the world. Kuga is amazed by that strength of will. After hearing this, Laios, who has been listening, says that Kuga has become completely captivated by Noel. He jokes and says, "No homo," meaning that Kuga's not in love with Noel, but that he has a deep respect for him as a rival, someone who pushes him to want to get stronger too. Now that Kuga thinks about it, Laios is so right, but he wonders how Laios has so much experience on this topic. So Laios explains that he too has experienced something similar, but that was a long time ago. The next day, Albert pulls up on Noel while he's at the secret tavern, and he's looking to make Noel pay for what he said. He's got A-rank Laios and a couple of B-rank seekers outside, so he's really confident that he can take Noel out today and plops down at Noel's table to confront him. He then grabs Noel's bottle of wine and starts chugging it as a display of superiority. But he absolutely hates how the wine tastes. Despite being outnumbered, Noel calmly roasts Albert and tells him it's bad manners to drink someone else's wine without invitation, although manners may be too difficult for Albert's brain to understand. Albert gets up in Noel's face in anger, so Noel tells him to back off since his bad breath is ruining Noel's appetite. Albert feels insulted, so he threatens to cut Noel's tongue off. But just before he can actually do anything, one of the seekers in the tavern walks up behind him and tells him to stop. He has no idea what kind of beef Albert has against Noel, but he wants to make it clear that, no matter the reason, he is not allowed to attack any seekers in this tavern. Albert is offended and asks the man if he knows who he is, and the seeker is well aware of Albert's reputation. But as a seeker, he and the other patrons of this bar refuse to let an outsider like Albert do what he wants. Albert doesn't like being told no, so he orders Laios and the rest of the bodyguards to kill Noel and all the seekers in the tavern. But the bodyguards are hesitant to comply with the order. Laios points out that killing all the seekers would be an easy task since everyone in the group is only C rank, but if they do that, they'll have to explain it to Don Luciano, and that's going to be really hard to justify. They're already in trouble because of the drug problem, and if they mess up again, it could mean the end for the Gambino family. Laios makes it clear that if Albert insists on going ahead with it, he'll make sure it's done. But it's not a good idea. Albert now feels unsure about what to do next. Seeing this, Noel takes the chance to roast Albert, calling him a coward and saying he's nothing but a useless piece of trash with no brains or reason. Albert's even angrier than before, but Noel tells him he had better be careful because all that anger will get his blood pumping, and that will spread the poison he drank from the wine even faster. After Noel mentioned that the wine was poisoned, Albert starts freaking out, and Noel goes on to explain that he poisoned it the second he saw Albert walk through the door. Albert can't believe Noel would do such a thing since there was no guarantee that Albert would drink it. But it is a pretty simple decision if you think about it. If Albert didn't drink the wine, then it would be no big deal. But since he did, victory is assured for Noel. Albert begins violently trying to throw up the poison, but Noel tells him it's too late for that since the poison has already made its way into Albert's bloodstream by now. Albert is now in full-on panic mode and rushes out of the bar to go to a doctor. But once Albert is gone, Laios compliments Noel for being so clever. He knows the wine wasn't actually poisoned, and that Noel was just saying that to convince Albert to get out here. Laios takes one look at Noel and can immediately tell that Kuga is right about the determination in his eyes. So as a favor, he offers Noel two choices. He can take this money and leave Atria so he doesn't get attacked by Albert again. But if he chooses to stay, then Laios will have no choice but to kill him right now. Noel decides to take the first option and gets up to leave with Alma. But as they leave the city gates, Alma is really impressed with Noel since everything goes according to his plan. He's glad everything has worked out so far, but things will only get harder from here on out. For now, Noel and Alma are going their separate ways for a week because there's something Noel wants to investigate, and Alma wants to go train in the woods so she'll be stronger than Kuga next time they fight. They fist bump on it, and Noel swears that by the time he returns, he will destroy Albert Gambino. A week later, Noel is back from his little expedition, and the second he sets foot in town, Albert pulls up on him with his entire army of bodyguards. He believes he has Noel cornered, so he orders them to start off by breaking all of Noel's arms and legs to make sure he suffers for as much time as possible. But surprisingly, Laios and the others completely ignore his order, and Albert doesn't understand what's going on. Noel breaks out, but since an idiot like Albert will never figure things out on his own, Noel explains to him that he has lost all right to order Laios and the others around. A little earlier that day, Laios and the others were all sitting together at a bar, and all of them were devastated because Albert had ordered them to kill a little girl earlier that day. She was holding on to this toy like it meant the world to her. They all feel insanely guilty about it, so they ask Laios why they keep following Albert's demented orders like this. They joined this line of work because they respected the former boss, but Albert had a restraining order on respect, so they couldn't keep following him. In the middle of their conversation, Noel shows up and notices them holding the gift he gave the daughter of the Mint Chief. Even though Noel thinks her father is a weasel, he still has some fondness for the little girl, so it really bothers him to know that Albert was the reason she was killed. It hurts him more than he expected. However, Noel didn't come here to dwell on that. He came to talk to Laios. Laios asks if Noel knows what's going to happen now that he's back in town, and Noel says he does. But he tells Laios that he didn't come to fight. Instead, he just wanted to drop off a document that might interest him. The paper he brings is Albert's birth certificate. Noel explains that he got it by having Loki investigate Albert's past while he was away for a week. What Loki found out is that Albert isn't actually the biological son of the man everyone thinks he is. In fact, Albert's real father is someone else, but the previous leader of the Gambinos had an affair with Albert's mother before he was born. So as a favor to her, he accepted Albert as his heir, even though Albert is not related to the Gambino family at all. There was also one other thing Noel wanted to look into, so he asked Loki to do some research about the former Gambino boss's cause of death. The results of that investigation revealed that not only is Albert not actually the former boss's son, but he also poisoned the former boss and made his death look like an illness. Albert has no idea how Noel managed to figure that out, but he tells them they can't prove that he really did anything. However, on the contrary, Noel has all the proof he could ever need because Noel has a handy skill called Confess that can be used to get people to admit to their crimes, and a confession from him will be more than enough evidence. Once Albert has been forced to admit to his crimes, Laios goes up to him and tells him that he is no longer their boss. He is immoral, stupid, and heartless, so they can't justify serving a man like him. At the same time, regardless of his actions, the former boss did name Albert as his successor, so Laios is going to give him one last chance to redeem himself. If he fights Noel and Noel wins, he can continue being the leader of the Gambino family. But Laios knows Albert would get folded immediately if he fought Noel himself, so he allows him to pick someone to represent him in battle. Albert refuses to be subjected to a trial like this, but all of a sudden, Pinocchio shows up. Noel invited her here to act as a witness to the duel, so Albert has no choice in the matter anymore. Fio has been looking for a way to get rid of Albert for a while now, so when Noel proposed this plan to him, he was more than happy to participate. Plus, if Noel wins this, Pinocchio will pay him 50 million. Albert accuses Fio of orchestrating this whole thing, but Pinocchio says he did no such thing and he's sick of listening to Albert's complaining. So he yells at him to quit messing around and pick someone to fight for him already, otherwise he will have to face much greater consequences at Pinocchio's hands. Albert agrees to pick a proxy, and Pinocchio tells him that if he wins, then he will be acknowledged as the boss of the Gambino family once more. Furthermore, he will even let the whole scene Albert caused at the secret tavern go, so he better make his choice quickly. Albert looks around for a second, and he ends up telling Kuga to fight for him. Noel had predicted this would happen since, even though Kuga isn't the strongest person here, he's bound by an oath of subordination, so he wouldn't be able to betray Albert even if he wanted to. Alm wants to have a rematch to prove that she's better than Kuga, but Noel pushes her aside and says he will handle it himself. Alma tries to convince him not to fight since she already knows he can't beat Kuga, but Noel believes he has a good chance of winning, so he tells her to just sit tight and watch him work. Once Noel is face to face with Kuga, he notices that Kuga looks really eager to fight, even though there's nothing in it for him if he wins. But Kuga is just glad he gets to fight Noel again, and if Noel is so eager to fight personally, then he must have a trick up his sleeve. and Kuga can't wait to see what it is. The two ready themselves and charge at each other, but Noll jumps into the air and fires an ice bullet. Even though Kuga manages to counter it, it still creates a massive ice wall around them, so now no one can see what's going on inside. As the fight goes on, Noll is running around to avoid getting slashed by Kuga, but when he finally creates some distance, Kuga takes a stance that means he's about to use his E-Flash. That skill basically increases Kuga's attack power 7-fold once he draws his sword, so if Noll gets too close, he might end up getting cut in half by it. But he still isn't worried because he has already planted the seeds to ensure his victory. To Kuga's surprise, Noll throws his gun away and says it's out of ammo, so he's going to be using a dagger to finish this. But before that, he has something important to say. "Can you do the thug shaker?" Kuga is caught off guard and asks Noll what that's supposed to mean. But Noll just said it so he could find an opening in Kuga's defenses to attack. Right now, Kuga is worried that Noll has a trump card up his sleeve, so he gets hesitant to counterattack, and that moment of hesitation is all Noll needs. Kuga eventually decides to fight back and slashes at Noll's arm, but this is all going according to plan, which is why Noll let him slash his arm. While Kuga's sword was stuck, Noll pulled it away from him. Kuga can't believe Noll would go that far for victory, but simply getting his sword away from him is nowhere near enough to stop Kuga, so he pushes Noll away and runs to catch his sword before it even hits the ground. Kuga then unleashes a slash that destroys the ice dome and sends Noll flying. But he isn't down yet. As he jumps out, Kuga lands a killing blow on Noll, or at least that's what he thought it was. But what he actually cut was an ice bullet Noll had stashed in his pocket, so the effects of the bullet caused Kuga's body to freeze solid. Everything Noll had done up to this point was for the sole purpose of making Kuga careless enough to fall for this trick. And now that Kuga's body is frozen, Noll jumps up and lands a kick that knocks him out. Ever since Kuga was a kid, he has never been able to fight back for himself because no one cared about him. But when he became a gladiator, he was forced to fight just to stay alive. While he hated every minute of it, all those death battles made him stronger. However, no matter how strong he got, he was always still that weak-minded little kid who couldn't fight back for himself, so he has only ever been able to do what he is told. Noll was declared the victor of the match, and as Kuga lies on the ground, he wishes he could be stronger like Noll. Despite being a talker, Noll has never once let others trample on his freedoms or ideals. Kuga is not going to be getting up for a while, but since the winner of the match has been decided, it looks like Albert has just lost all rights to call himself the leader of the Gambino family. Noll's job here is done, so he calls over to Finocchio and says he is leaving. They are free to do whatever they want with Albert. Before Noll leaves, Leos compliments him on his incredible fighting ability and thanks him for finally getting rid of Albert. He says that if there's ever a time when Noll needs help, he'll be happy to offer any assistance he can. But Noll turns down the offer and says he doesn't want to associate himself with the Gambino family any longer. Noll and Alma head to a nearby building, where Alma starts patching up his wounds. She tells Noll he was being far too reckless in his fight. That final kick he delivered to Kuga's chest was way too risky, because Kuga could have easily countered it if he had been expecting it. Noll says everything worked out in the end, so she shouldn't be worrying about it. But Alma reminds him that fighting is her job, and Noll's job is to be the commander, so she doesn't want him to keep getting into reckless fights personally. Noll apologizes and promises that he won't do it again. Alma tells him he can always rely on her when it comes to fighting. Just then, Finocchio walks into the room, and he congratulates Noll on doing such a good job. But there's something he wants to talk to him about. Noll asks if this has anything to do with the payment he's supposed to get for defeating Albert, because if so, he won't be allowing any discounts. But Finocchio laughs and says he would never try to bargain with such a thing because this was a really good deal for him. He got rid of an incompetent rival, all without having to take on any personal risk, so Noll earned every bit of that 50 million. But there's something else he wants to talk about with Noll in private, so he asks Alma if she can leave the room for a bit. Noll tells Alma it's alright, so she leaves the room. As soon as she is gone, Finocchio gets straight to the point and asks Noll to join his Luciano family. He promises to treat Noll well, and if he wants, Finocchio is even willing to make Noll the leader of the Gambino family. Noll finds the idea amusing, but he reminds Finocchio that he is only 16. So how could he possibly lead an entire family by himself? Finocchio tells him age is irrelevant in the matter. The only thing that's important is the fact that Noll has got the guts to do it. Noll admits that Finocchio is right about that, but Noel has already turned down this invitation once before, so Pinocchio should know by now that there's no way Noel would ever serve under anyone. Pinocchio asks Noel if he's sure about that answer, and Noel says he is sure. So Pinocchio informs Noel that his class is an A-rank Punisher, and as such, he has access to a pretty interesting skill. All of a sudden, Noel realizes that something is terribly wrong, and as he looks up, he sees that Pinocchio is literally holding his heart in the palm of his hand. Noel checks to make sure, and just as expected, he has no heartbeat in his chest. Pinocchio begins explaining how the skill works. The judgment skill allows him to remove the heart of his target against their will after they refuse a request from him twice. But even though Noel has no heart right now, he is still alive because the heart is still spatially linked to his body. However, if Pinocchio steps more than 5 meters away from Noel or crushes his heart, Noel will die. Pinocchio thinks Noel is a little too talented to be left on his own because he will eventually become a problem for the Pinocchio family. Noel asks if Pinocchio intends to kill him before he becomes a possible threat, and that's exactly what Pinocchio intends to do. But he's willing to give Noel one last chance, so he asked him again to join the Luciano family. At this, Noel laughs and says he will never agree to that. He gets up, so Pinocchio tells him trying to fight is pointless because his heart won't go back into his chest unless Pinocchio dispels the skill. However, this doesn't stop Noel, as he continues approaching Pinocchio and declares that he will indeed become the greatest seeker that has ever lived, so great, in fact, that the Luciano family would never be able to touch him. So with that in mind, Pinocchio has the right idea when he says the best thing to do is kill him now. He encourages Pinocchio to do it. But he also reminds him that the second he does it, he will be admitting that he is a coward. He is so scared of Noel that he decided to kill him while he is still weak rather than have to deal with him once he becomes strong. Whether Pinocchio chooses to kill him now or not, Noel makes it clear that he will bow down to no one. So even though Pinocchio is the one holding N's heart in his hand, Noel has managed to grip Pinocchio's heart with fear. Pinocchio backtracks and says he was only kidding about killing him. So he returns Noel's heart to his chest. He then apologizes for the misunderstanding and turns to head out. But before he leaves, he reminds Noel that he can't take back what he has said, so he better makes it to the top of the world of seekers for real. Pinocchio then leaves, and as he is walking out, he locks eyes with Alma, who looks like she's on the verge of murdering him after that little stunt he pulled in there. But she doesn't do anything, so he keeps walking and returns to his carriage, where Albert is being held. As soon as Albert spots Pinocchio, he begins begging for his life because he doesn't want to be killed, and Pinocchio finds it a little annoying to look at Albert's pitiful face. But he has a good idea, so he says he won't kill Albert, but he does ask him if he has ever seen the Human Centipede movie. So it's clear that Albert is in for a terrible time now that Pinocchio has him. The next day, Noel meets with Kuga and shows him that he is now in possession of the contract of subordination that binds him as a slave. Kuga thinks this means Noel wants to become his master, but Noel says he has no use for a slave like him. It's true that Kuga is decently powerful, but compared to the rest of the Seekers in this world, he is still pretty much a weakling. And more importantly, Noel wishes to stand at the top of the world of Seekers, so he doesn't have time to take care of a weak little puppy because what he needs is a fierce wolf. He hands Kuga the contract and tells him he's a free man, so he can do whatever he wants now. And now that he's free, Noel asks him what he wants to do. Koa has spent his whole life being used by others, so when given the opportunity to be free, he doesn't really know what to do with himself. But he does know one thing, and that's the fact that he wants to be by Noel's side to watch him achieve his dream. So if Noel needs a fierce wolf, then that's what he will become. He asked Noel to allow him to join Blue Beyond, and Noel is more than happy to have Koga on the team. A little while later, the party heads out on their first mission, and their overall teamwork is nearly flawless. Noel gives the commands and provides support. Kuga cuts through the enemy forces, and Alma clears a path for him to do so. They are a well-oiled machine, but as Kuga tries to chop off the head of the monster general, Alma comes in and steals his kill, so the two start arguing over it. Noel steps in and tells them both to knock it off since they are all on the same team. He tells Alma to stop acting out on the battlefield since it messes up their teamwork, but he also reminds Kuga that there are no kill counts here, so he shouldn't be getting so upset over Alma stealing his kill. That aside, this was a really good outcome for their first quest as a party of 3. So Noel says that as soon as they get back to Ria, he's going to apply for them to become a clan. As a clan, they will officially be recognized by the state, meaning they will be able to take on quests without having to go through any intermediaries or pay any commissions. As he says this, Kuga notices something on Noel's arm, so he points it out, and Noel realizes it's the mark that means he can rank up to B rank. This is great news since, alongside his team, it brings him one step closer to his goal of becoming the strongest 7-star regalia seeker. A couple of years ago, Noel was having a meeting with the guild supervisor Harold Jenkins, and he was here to discuss business matters with Noel. After his grandpa died, Noel inherited the family winery and has been doing pretty well so far, but Noel intends to step down as the owner pretty soon because he has other things he wants to focus on. Anyway, getting down to business, Noel wants to know why Harold would want to meet with him so suddenly. So he is straight to the point and shows Noel a picture of a monster lord that appeared a few days ago, and he suspects that it may be the same one that destroyed Noel's village and killed his grandpa. Noel is shocked, but he has his suspicion that the lord might have survived that fight because on the day of the tragedy, there were two things missing from the battlefield: the lord's body and over Death's axe. He asks the guild supervisor if the monster has been dealt with, so the supervisor tells him that a major clan was sent out to take care of the lord, but they were all wiped out, and by the time they sent the supreme dragon after it, the lord had already returned to the void. The fact that the monster returned to the void is pretty alarming because monsters usually invade this world because of their overwhelming instinct to conquer it. But the lord must be manifesting itself with clear intentions. After its second appearance, it is believed that this thing might have reached the level of the Valiants from the 13th layer of the Abyss. There are currently 10 known Valiants, and each one of them is said to be capable of wiping out the entire world if left unchecked. Although the last time a Valiant manifested itself in their world was 40 years ago, and for the first time in human history, it was actually defeated by No's grandpa. Up until that point, everyone thought the best they could do was force the Valiant back into the Abyss if they came through. But Over proved that defeating it was possible. Still, he is worried that the appearance of the Lord might cause another great catastrophe. After hearing all this, the look on Noel's face wasn't one of fear, but rather one of determination to become strong enough to take that Lord down if he ever encounters it. Harold recognizes that the look in No's eyes is the same one that Over Death had since he was good friends with him while he was alive. He tells Noel he can't wait to see what kind of seeker he's going to become in the future. Back in the present, Harold sees Noel and his friends walking up to his office. Once Noel and the others get in, Kuga is feeling really nervous since he is worried he might say something wrong and get them rejected. But Noel assures him that this is just an evaluation for their clan formation request, so they are just going to be asked a bunch of simple questions, and Noel is absolutely sure they will be accepted. Just then, they feel a terrifying presence at the door, so they all instinctively react and get into battle positions. But it turns out that it was just Harold. He says that there's no need for them to be so nervous and tells Noel it's nice to see him again. Harold is the one in charge of reviewing their clan application, so he sits down across from the group and begins reading off their report. It looks like they already acquired a clan house as well as the 20 million for the security deposit, so it's clear that they thought this through before applying. Noel adds that he plans to rank up to B rank immediately after his clan is approved, and so does Alma, although Kuga hasn't met the requirements for a rank up yet. Harold acknowledges that but asks why the party name on the paperwork isn't Blue Beyond, so Noel tells him that he intends to change the name of the party when the clan is formed. Harold has no problem with that, so he says he is done with the interview. Kuga is surprised that it was so easy to pass the interview, but Harold corrects him and says they didn't pass the interview because he's rejecting their application. Elsewhere, in an abyss, a party is left in utter shock as they witness a single man take down a monster from a 12-layer abyss all by himself. Although this man is the vice commander of the Supreme Dragon Onir Regalia Party, Zeke Feinstein, this was actually a pretty tame battle for him. Back to Noel and the others, Kuga is shocked to hear that they are being rejected, so he gets up and asks Harold why. Harold wants to be transparent with them, so he says the guild is currently only accepting stronger seekers for clans, so meeting the requirements to form a clan isn't enough to be accepted anymore. Kuga doesn't think that's fair, but just before he starts complaining, Noel cuts him off and asks Harold what caused this sudden change in policy. Harold isn't supposed to be giving out this information, but over on the west border, there has been some strange mana flow occurring. It's just a matter of time until it reaches a critical state and erupts to form an abyss. Estimates suggest they have about a year before this happens, but when it does happen, a massive abyss will spawn, and that means a depth 13 Valiant is going to spawn. Hobart asks if there's any way to stop this from happening, but the mana flowing in the earth is a very delicate system, so if they try to disrupt it, they could end up causing an even worse disaster. Alma asks if there's any way for them to kill the Valiant then, and Harold says it's possible, but it would require the joint effort of all the 1, 2, and 3-star regalias combined. Even then, as someone who has first-hand experience with the Valiant, Harold isn't sure they will be able to win. That's why the guild is only interested in accepting seekers who are already capable of engaging in a fight of that level because they don't have time or resources to waste on training rookies at the moment. Huga says that's way too unfair, but Noel says there is nothing they can do about it since they don't meet the conditions that the guild is looking for, so he gets up without any arguments and says it's time for them to leave. As they leave, Huga asks Noel if he's really going to give up on his dream so easily, but Noel never says he is giving up. He simply wants to take full advantage of an opportunity that just presented itself. While the appearance of a Valiant is an event that could possibly wipe out all humanity, it is also an incredibly fortunate thing. For example, the living conditions in Etria rose dramatically after Karshutis was defeated 40 years ago because the gem from the monster was used to make a magic device that creates purified water for the entire nation. When stronger monsters are defeated, more advanced magical engineering is developed, resulting in large boosts in the standard of living. That's why Seekers are seen as heroes by the people because they can turn unpredictable disasters into blessings. Noel plans to turn this unpredictable disaster around in his favor, so he tells the others that they have to become recognized as regalia as soon as possible. Kuga is shocked when he hears Noel say this because they haven't even become a clan yet, and Noel is already talking about becoming a regalia. Alma isn't as surprised and believes Noel will be able to pull it off somehow, but then Noel says they are going to need to become regalia in less than 6 months. Even she doesn't think that's possible. Noel explains that the time frame is so short because he plans to gain enough experience to become recognized as a regalia, and then, ideally, they will be asked to join the fight against the Valiant. If they manage to pull it off, their names will go down in history as some of the strongest seekers ever. But to accomplish all this, they need to have a lot of experience and accomplishments under their belt by the time they actually become a clan. The fastest way to do that is to achieve something so spectacular that it grabs the attention of the public. It looks like Noel already has the perfect plan in mind. The first thing he does is rank up to a strategist. After the process has been completed, as a strategist, Noel now possesses enhanced cognitive abilities that allow him to analyze battles in real time and give orders based on his predictions. After he's done, Noel heads out into the street, and he just so happens to run into Zeke while he's being praised by the public for his recent Abyss raid. As soon as Zeke notices Noel, he walks over to him, and Noel is a bit cautious about this interaction since Zeke is one of the only 3 people to reach X rank. The other 2 are Leon, the leader of the Kingslayer clan, and Victor, the current leader of the Supreme Dragons. Zeke is interested in Noel and asks if he was the one who overthrew the Gambino family a couple of days ago, but Noel tries to play dumb and says he doesn't know anything about that. However, Zeke isn't fooled by Noel's act and is already aware of how capable he is. So Noel gives up on playing dumb and asks Zeke what he wants. Zeke says he wants to recruit Noel into his clan, but before he's even done speaking, Noel cuts him off and says he refuses to work under anyone. Zeke can tell by the look in Noel's eyes that he is firm on that decision. Zeke is the type of person who will do whatever it takes to get what he wants, even if it means using force. Noel tells him that he is welcome to use as much force as he wants, but if Noel were ever going to take orders from someone, he would need to see that person as the strongest. Victor, being already quite old, is past his prime now, so that leaves Zeke and Leon as the top seekers. Noel tells Zeke that if he wants to lead him, he will have to prove that he is stronger than Leon. But the truth is, Zeke could never do that, because if Zeke and Leon fought, one of them would end up dying, and there's no way for Zeke to guarantee he would win. Noel doesn't care though and tells Zeke he will only have the right to recruit him once he has proven that he is the strongest. As Noel leaves, 2 random guys turn around the corner, and when they see Zeke, one of them makes the unfortunate mistake of calling Zeke the second strongest seeker in the nation. And it absolutely sets Zeke off. Zeke walks over to the guy and asks him why he just said that. The guy tries to explain that everyone just thinks Leon is stronger because he has cleared more abysses than Zeke has. But that's not what Zeke wanted to hear, so he launches the guy hundreds of feet into the air. Noel was listening in on the whole exchange, and now he knows that Zeke is sensitive about people calling him the second strongest. Noel knows he needs to hurry up and form a clan before Zeke becomes even more of a problem for him. Meanwhile, in the forest, Alma and Licia are practicing combat. Throughout their training, Licia completely dominates Alma, easily taking control every time. After Licia pins Alma down with an arrow right at her neck, they decide to stop and take a break. Licia tells Alma that she needs to work on her situational awareness. Alma often gets too caught up in the heat of the moment during a fight and loses track of the bigger picture. This is the complete opposite of Noel, who stays calm and collected, thinking through everything carefully as a leader. Alma thinks she should just leave the decision-making to Noel then, and Licia agrees with her because everyone in a party has their own specialties, and she's sure Noel will make good use of Alma's skill. Just then, one of Licia's friends, Ophelia, comes running up to her, and she's really glad they happened to run into each other here. Ophelia has never met Alma before, so she asks Licia about her. Licia says Alma is her friend, and she's just out here helping Alma train a little bit. Alma's training partner is part of Ophelia's group, called the Winged Knights, which has 4 members. These members are Kayan the Lancer, Vaclav the Summoner, and their strong and dependable leader, Leon. Ophelia tells Alma that if she ever needs help, she can come to her because a friend of Licia's is a friend of hers. Ophelia also wants to give Alma some advice. She warns her to stay away from a man named Noel Stalin. From what Ophelia has heard, Noel sold his own teammates as slaves and has been making shady deals with the mafia. Based on all the terrible things he has done, Ophelia is sure that Noel is an evil and dishonest person. But Leon stops her rant and tells her it's not nice to judge people based on rumors, especially when she has never actually met Noel before. Ophelia apologizes for going too far, but it's time for her party to go, so they start heading back to town. Once they are gone, Licia apologizes to Alma for what Ophelia said about Noel, but Alma doesn't really mind since most of what she said actually happened. Later that night, Noel meets up with Loki because he asked him earlier to gather some information. Loki hands him a list of parties that have recently moved up to B rank. At the top of the list is a group called the Wayne Knights, and they stand out because of their great achievements and good public reputation. Their leader, Leon, has a perfect record, and he's known for being a kind person, which makes him even more likable. However, Noel is aiming to reach the top of B rank, and if Leon and his party are in the number 1 spot right now, Noel knows he will have to do whatever it takes to surpass them and take that top spot for himself. So the first thing is to get someone to join the party, and Hugo Capelia Puppeteer, number 113, gets a surprising visit from Noel in the prison. But by the looks of it, Noel is sure this guy is losing more weight than his wallet after the shopping spree. Thus, he spills his plan to get him out of there and back on the team. Noel gets that this murderer, once known as the Prodigy Seeker, who shook the capital city, is on hold for execution. Hugo, the puppeteer, is nothing short of a mega mind, with a super rare job that comes with a combo of combat and production. This baddest fighter controls puppet soldiers in any kind of battle, with a surety of leading them all to victory. Though this solo loner wolf, aka Prodigy Seeker, never loses his cool with a smart head, like a freelance seeker, he takes everyone around to no less than a win. But then he quit it all to be a doll maker, like a total surprise move that turned out to be a killer deal hitting the jackpot. However, this new path flipped Hugo's life upside down. Noel, either way, wants to get him on board, but Hugo doesn't see that happening. With a hefty, lousy performance, Noel shows how he got the whole guard system in his pocket, carving a path for Hugo's freedom. Cutting to the chase, Hugo would like to hop out of this rotten cellar, but he just can't stand those violent idiot seekers who put on a big show of their combat prowess for no damn reason. Although he sees Noel got a totally different personality, like a snake, knowing the art of swallowing people whole. However, Noel reminds this puppet dude that he won't be taking no for an answer, as snakes are pretty persistent themselves. After he walks out, Hugo bets that his seeker days might be coming back. Afterward, Noel takes the lot to their new hangout place, the Rock Hard Beak. Alma's only concern revolves around their menu and food options because that's a major issue. That's when it hits Koga that this place hosts only B+ ranked seekers, but Noel doesn't got any damn to give. On their first step in, the atmosphere here gets super intense already, with the major seeker load eyeing this bunch from top to bottom. That said, a redhead Iron Man walks to this cutie, telling that he hasn't seen her here before. Noel corrects this buffoon that he is talking to a man. This cracks him up, that he's talking to such a pretty-faced dude with 0 battle scars. Noel is amused by his take on manhood defined by ugly scars. After their trash talk takes the heat, Noel bets Edgar's last show of raiding the War Eagle's captain telling enough that he can't do 1-on-3. Before Edgar gets rough, Noel congratulates Edgar for either Quechua or Bruno who's coming out soon, pointing at how not to take him that lightly. Not gonna lie, this Noel guy got a knack for poking fun at macho losers. Things were getting super heated up between Edgar and this guy, but Noel's ace cornered him up so well. My man plays like a pro. With a little snaky trick, Edgar makes a swift escape, and Noel thanks for clearing out the pathway. Koga is totally blown away by Noel's slick moves. Without wasting another second, the sneaky guy introduces himself as the leader of Blue Beyond, who will be joining them today. Later, Alma loves the food here, while Koga is surprised to see his hometown's booths here of all places. On the other hand, Noel wants these buffoons to pay attention and stay focused on their operation. He reminds the lads not to stray far from their agenda, as they have gotten lucky on their first visit. Ophelia, a pink-haired elf, walks to Alma, totally clueless, so she asks her if she isn't a newbie. Through Alma, Noel learns this chick is familiar with Licia and surely doesn't think well of Noel. With a sinister grin, this classic player would like to have fun fighting here now. Upon asking, Alma introduces her two teammates, Noel and Koga. That name totally dulls Ophelia's face when she recalls this guy sold out his party members over a killer deal from the mob. In no time, this chick jumps to hit Noel, but Koga comes to the rescue, and he wants no chick scaring his pretty master. Ophelia thinks of Koga as Noel's loyal dog. Before it gets rough, the blondie of Winged Knights, Leon Frederick, marches in to check out Ophelia. Noel teases the lad that he better leash her chaotic girl, who was just about to grab him out of nowhere. Bowing to apologize, Noel mocks this guy, saying that he got a member dumber than the loyal dog here. This charming captain of Winged Knights is super annoyed by Noel's loose mouth. Ophelia fills him in. And now this dude feels disgusted to know Noel can stoop this low for a good sum of money. Noel wants to cut Winged Knights' loser to cut their know-it-all arrogant act. Leon warns Noel that karma will be out to get him soon enough. That cracks him up, so Noel bets that Leon's preacher look wouldn't last longer as well. He warns that his godlike ego burst will see his downfall pretty fast. That totally pisses him off. Leon walks while the whole audience checks out this rumble, seeing Noel with dagger eyes like he's the national trash. Alma confirms that Noel's villain scene was a hit. Noel sees the plan worked, but he reveals his dirty cards, which even shocks Alma and Koga. Thus, Noel explains how the Seeker world would eat the cocky ones super quick, the ones who show their backs to the enemies. With a wicked laugh, he describes Winged Knights as their stepping stones. Later, over the couch, Marion, the Seeker Guild inspector, asks his grandpa's favorite in the lot that can stand against the valiant. Marion calls her bets on Leo Eden. Though she is in charge of Pandemonium, this chick knows Leo's arrogant nature combined with his lousy take on life is trouble. But his power has to be the strongest in all of history. She gets Zeke's Feinstein's power burst. Cackling like a hyena, Marion cracked up seeing Grandpa's choice. But this old man is down to bet the head of the Jenkins family position over this Leo versus Noel thing. However, he clears up that Marion's losing streak here would get her into etiquette school, a perfect shot to be a perfect inspector. Later, seeing the happy drunkards talk of the future makes Keem feel super nostalgic. He recalls seeing Leon getting straight up bullied for snitching on the little thieves. After handling the fuss, little Keem wants Leon to fight back, but Leon isn't the guy to strike violence with violence. After seeing the spark in Leon's eyes, Keem forms their goals to be the ultimate world-class seekers together. Leon feels like he isn't cut out for this, but Keem points out that a swordsman like Leon and a lancer like him would defeat the beasts to help humanity. With such a moving speech, they set their goals. Keem always sees the spark in Leon, which he lacks, and that only pulls him even more to Leon. Later, as part of Winged Knights, Keem's firm belief in Leon helped him take down the Depth 7 forest dragon Ayatar. Keem bets their party, Twilight Glint, would take the new heights after this. Twilight Glint wasn't as catchy, so people called the Winged Knights after Leon's special angel wings ability. Keem sees Leon as the face of hope. At the bar, Keem cools down Leon, who got a bit cranky over some kid getting into the high-class club that took them years to get into. But he admires Noel's hard work in getting this far. Afterward, Keem discusses the Seeker Guild's letter to form clans, and all Winged Knights want Leon to decide. The next day, Winged Knights' applications get a solid rejection for not packing enough hunger to reach heights, like forming a clan earlier. Seeing Valiant come out of the shadow, Grandpa got a pretty tight schedule. Leon bows low for another chance, as going empty-handed isn't on his to-do list. So this old buffoon comes to the point that they better defeat the Dantalian Abyssal, Depth 8th, before another party does. Looks like the Winged Knight Paul's got a straight-up reality check from this old fart. Now for the grand reveal, Noel Stalin drops in, so the Winged Knights are in for a steamy fight. Harold sat both groups down to explain the mission. The objective was clear: kill the level 8 abyss monster known as Dantalian. However, Dantalian wasn't your typical monster. It could read minds, which made it incredibly dangerous, as it could predict and counter any strategy the Seekers came up with. On top of that, the monster had a reputation for being sadistic, often torturing those who failed to defeat it. The gruesome track record made it clear: failure meant death. The task itself was daunting, but Harold wanted to make sure the rules were crystal clear. The first group to kill Dantalian would be the winner, but there was an important caveat. No one wanted any room for misinterpretation, so Harold asked a crucial question: was interference allowed between parties? While the goal was to defeat the monster, the dynamics between the two teams could complicate things. If both groups were after the same prize, could they sabotage each other to gain an advantage? The possibility of competing teams trying to outsmart or even outright sabotage one another added an extra layer of tension. After all, with a monster as deadly as Dantalian, any edge, whether through strategy, surprise, or interference, could make all the difference. Leon objects to this since he and his party have a firm rule against killing humans, but Harold tells him there's no need to worry about that since the guild forbids murder. Although you are allowed to attack the opposing party to give yourself an advantage, you must ensure that the other party survives no matter what. To make sure the rules are followed properly, Harold will be using his unique skill to monitor the entire competition, so there will be no room for cheating. There are no objections so far, but Noel has some conditions he wants to add to the rule set. So he says there should be a rule that all participants must be in perfect fighting conditions at the beginning of the competition. Harold agrees to this, and since there are no further concerns about the rules, he carries on with the explanation about this competition. He wants to make it very clear that this competition is a special case, so there will be no second chances. And to make sure they do their best, he's adding a penalty. The losing party will be forced to disband their team, and furthermore, they will be banned from reforming their party. Any attempts to circumvent this penalty will result in the losing party members losing their Seeker's license. So Harold asks if they are really sure they want to go through with it. Noel doesn't hesitate as he signs his name, and after a little confirmation from Keem, Leon signs up as well. And now that everyone has agreed to the terms, Harold officially declares that the competition will be held 3 days from now, so they had best get ready. Harold then leaves the room. As a gesture of goodwill, Leon shakes Noel's hand and says he will fight with everything he's got during your battle. But even though the odds are definitely in Leon's favor with his party being stronger and more experienced, Noel recently ranked up and became a strategist. So with his enhanced thinking, he can already see Leon pathetically losing. The day of the competition finally arrives, and Harold greets both parties, explaining the rules once more. Both parties will venture into the abyss, and the first one to defeat a Dantalian will be victorious. On Harold's signal, the competition officially begins. But to Leon's surprise, Noel and the others literally sit down and start having a picnic together. Lime asks Noel what he thinks he's doing, but Noel just says he's having lunch, so he's letting the Winged Knights make the first move. This makes no sense to Leon, so he starts yelling at Noel to take this seriously. But Keem stops him since there's no point in wasting time on him. The Winged Knights make their way into the abyss, and Alia can hear a horde of monsters heading their way, so she warns the party to get ready. But before they start fighting, there's something Vad wants to say. He tells Leon that Noel actually approached him before the match and tried to convince him to betray the party. Of course, Vav turned him down, but he's just mentioning this in case Noel approached any other party members. And as it turns out, both Keem and Alia were approached by Noel as well. Leon was shocked that Noel tried to convince everyone in the party except him to become a traitor, but the others told him there was no need to worry since they would never betray him. The things Noel was saying didn't even make sense to him at the time since he kept telling Vav he would be free if he betrayed the party. They think he was just trying to create suspicion to throw them off their game, so it's a good thing they were able to clear up any misunderstandings immediately because that horde of monsters just arrived, so they are going to have to fight with everything they've got. Meanwhile, outside the abyss, Noel and the others are still casually enjoying their meal. But Harold has some thoughts about the way Noel is handling this. Earlier, he met with Noel and told him he was impressed with how he tricked the Winged Knights into doing exactly what he wanted. but he can't condone the fact that Noel forged official guild letters in the process. Noel asks if Harold intends to disqualify him for what he did, but Harold decides to let it slide. After all, he asked Noel if he really thought he could win, though there was not a doubt in Noel's mind that he would come out victorious because that's what his grandpa taught him to do. Although back in the present, Kat is starting to get a little worried about them wasting time here since there's a chance that the Winged Knights might actually be able to kill the Dantalian. But Noel reminds him that this is all part of their plan. The Winged Knights are a strong party, so they need to be patient about how they approach the contest, especially with Leon around since he is not only an excellent leader, but he is also strong and has incredible decision-making skills. Not to mention, when he activated his unique Angel Wings ability, his monoflow speed increased, allowing him to activate skills with no cooldown time. There's no doubt that he has talent bestowed by the heavens, but there are times when excellence can be a burden. He tells Koga and Alma that they don't need to worry since no matter what, he is sure they will win. After all, he has already planted the seeds of mistrust that will end up splitting the Winged Knights up because he told everyone except Leon what's going to happen. Leon is going to end up betraying them before the match. Noel went to see Keem at the bar, and the second Keem noticed Noel, he became hostile. But Noel reminds him of the rules they set regarding interference. All they said was that all participants must be in perfect fighting condition, so no attacks before the contest would happen. So under those rules, Noel approaching him like this wouldn't count as interference, but if Keem tries to chase him off with violence, that would constitute a rule violation. Not while he has Keem's attention, Noel gets the point and asks Keem to betray Leon. Keem bursts out laughing because he can't believe Noel actually thought he would betray Leon so easily. But just out of curiosity, he asks what he would get in return. Noel answers that he would get to be free from Leon's shadow. Once Keem hears this, he stops laughing, so Noel continues and says it is clear that the Winged Knights are a lopsided party with a majority of their strength coming from Leon. Even if they did end up forming a clan, they wouldn't be able to keep up with Leon since no amount of hard work would be able to match up to Leon's raw talent. Keem admits that Noel is right about Leon being the strongest in the party, but he still wants to support him with everything he has because they are sworn brothers. But as Keem was leaving the bar, Noel told him that if he didn't betray Leon, then Leon was going to end up betraying him first. Back to the present, the party is up against the Dantalian, and they've managed to take out all of the smaller monsters, but the creature is able to read all their thoughts, so it is hard to make any progress against it. Vad tries to launch a fire spell to catch the Dantalian off guard, but the monster is easily able to read his attacks and dodges the attack. Sneak attacks won't work against it, but with Leon's Angel Wing skill, he's fast enough to fight with the Dantalian on equal footing. But when the Dantalian jumps in the air with a fistful of rocks, Leon realizes what's going on and warns everyone just before the monster launches a hailstorm their way. Back outside the abyss, Koba can hear the battle taking place in there and asks Noel if they still shouldn't get involved yet, but Noel says they should wait for the Winged Knights to reach their limit in there before they do anything. In the aftermath of the hailstorm, most of the Winged Knights are still alright, but Aelia has been knocked down by the rocks and lost an arm because of it. The Dantalian begins cheering once it realizes it managed to severely injure one of the party members, but Leon has no intention of letting Aelia die, so he tells the others to retreat with her while he holds the Dantalian off. He uses his Holy Shield skill to keep the Dantalian busy and remarks that Leon is a really strong toy, but the others are weak, so they can't win. Leon admits that they aren't strong enough to win, but a seeker never gives up, so even if they can't win right now, he's going to keep fighting and use his invincible skill to blind the Dantalian for a moment so he can get away. He catches back up with the rest of the party, and while they are hidden by a barrier, Vakla uses some healing magic to stick Aelia's arm back on. Thankfully, she regains the feeling in her arm, but she still can't move it around much, so she won't be able to use her bow anymore. She apologizes to Leon for being such a burden, but Leon tells her she doesn't have to worry about it. But as much as he hates to say it, they might need to give up on defeating the Dantalian. However, before he finishes his sentence, Keem cuts him off and says he has a plan. He will act as a decoy to draw out the Dantalian, and when he does, he wants Leon to attack it with his ultimate slash attack. Leon immediately objects because not only will that attack use up all of his remaining mana, but it is also an area of effect attack, so he will most likely end up hitting the others if he uses it. Keem reminds him that this was the same way they defeated the level 7 monster, and this is their only choice anyway. They are currently being hidden by Vlad's concealment spell, but if they try to attack from inside here, the spell will be destroyed, so a sneak attack from here isn't an option. He tells Leon that he will try to lure the monster as far away from here as possible to keep the others safe, but he isn't planning to let himself die either. He's just going to jump out of the way at the last second like before, so he assures Leon that everything will be alright. However, Leon simply refuses since that plan won't work. The Dantalion is capable of reading minds, so it will immediately realize that Keem is nothing but a decoy. Keem asks what Leon wants to do then, because if they retreat now, they will lose the competition and be forced to disband their party. However, Leon says there's another way out of this, so he suggests that they should team up with Noel. The others can't believe what they are hearing, but Lane explains that if they team up with Noel, they may not get approved as a clan, but maybe they can avoid being forced to disband. Keem starts yelling that Noel is their enemy, so they can't possibly team up with him, but Leon remains firm on his decision because this is the only way to avoid sacrificing anyone on the team, so it's the right thing to do. However, Keem doesn't care about the right thing right now. He just cares that Leon seems to trust Noel more than him. But given the circumstances, Leon admits that he thinks Noel is more likely to succeed than Keem is. Keem is devastated to hear this, so he walks up to Leon and stabs him in the gut. He admits that all this time he has been jealous of how talented Leon is, but he thinks of him as a brother, so he has stuck with him this whole time. He was even willing to give up his life for Leon because he thought Leon trusted him, but now he just wants to be free. All of a sudden, the Dantalion lands in front of the group, and for a moment, they are terrified because they stand no chance of beating it. But it turns out that the Dantalion isn't after them right now. It's after Noel, who just arrived. Noel fires a bullet to distract it while he orders Koba to attack from above. And to the Dantalion's surprise, it can't read any of their attacks. In preparation for this battle, Noel and the others train using Noel's mind link skill, so they are now able to carry out Noel's orders with an empty mind, so the Dantalion can't read their thoughts. As for Noel, with his strategist mind, he is able to think so fast that the Dantalion can't keep up with his thoughts. The Dantalion suffers a massive headache from reading Noel's mind, so it is forced to rip out its third eye so it doesn't have to hear Noel's thoughts anymore. But this is exactly what Noel was waiting for, because now he can give the order for Alma to finish the Dantalion off. She activates her acceleration skill and charges forward, feigning an attack to deceive the Dantalion. As it attempts to counter, she triggers a second ability, phasing through its hand. This is the Phantom skill she unlocked after ranking up, allowing her to turn intangible once every 24 hours, rendering all physical attacks useless. Seizing the moment while the Dantalion's guard is down, she unleashes another rapid attack skill, punching a hole through its chest. With that, the monster falls, the abyss is cleared, and Noel's team is declared the winner of the competition. As an added bonus, the battle gives Koga enough experience to rank up, putting him back on par with Noel and Alma. Koga wastes no time teasing Alma about it, but Keem steps in, questioning whether this was Noel's plan all along. Noel doesn't deny it. He confesses to orchestrating everything, from pushing the guild to hold the competition to selecting the Dantalion as their opponent for its favorable matchup. He even admits to sending fake letters to pique the Winged Knight's interest in forming a clan. Hearing this, Keem, furious, grabs Noel by the jacket, but Noel calmly points out that Keem and his team contributed to their own downfall. After all, Keem betrayed Leon out of jealousy. While everyone in the Winged Knights is strong, Leon is the only one truly gifted, and the rest of them are merely living in the shadow of his success. It's natural for them to become envious of him, but they keep their envy buried for so long that it has eaten away at their bond. So all it took was a little nudge from Noel to break them apart. Noel learned firsthand that even the smallest crack in a team's bond can lead to disaster. But in this case, he thinks Leon is actually the one at fault here. Keem wouldn't have stabbed him if Leon had trusted him. Just then, Harold walks up and declares that Noel's party is the winner of this competition, so he will officially recognize them as a clan. In accordance with the rules of this contest, as the losers, the Winged Knights will be forced to disband with immediate effect. The news of the contest spreads throughout the capital, and a lot of people are devastated since they actually really like the Winged Knights. As for the Winged Knights themselves, Ophelia decides to give up on being a seeker because she doesn't think she has what it takes to continue, so she says goodbye to Letitia. On the other hand, Vad accepts an offer and joins another party that same day. Meanwhile, Noll goes to visit Hugo to tell him all about the recent events, but Hugo doesn't think it's a good thing since the Winged Knights were one of the few parties that were actually made up of good people. Noll doesn't think he did anything wrong since the relationship between the Winged Knights was already destined to fall apart, so all he did was speed up the process. Hugo finally understands Noll's true intentions behind everything, but he can't fathom how destroying the Winged Knights would convince Leon to join him. Noll, however, assures him that he already has a plan in place to bring Leon over to his side. Once Leon is on board, Noll promises to persuade Hugo to join the team as well. With that, Noll leaves the prison. Elsewhere in the city, Keem drowns his sorrows at a bar, determined to drink his pain away. When he asks for another drink, the bartender refuses, deeply concerned that Keem is trying to drink himself to death. The bartender knows what happened, but he reminds Keem that he's still young and can start over with another group. Keem, however, is stuck in his regret, unable to move on. Looking back, he realizes that if Leon had agreed to his plan, it would have been a death sentence. There was no way it could have succeeded. Leon's decision at the time was the best choice to protect everyone, but instead of supporting him, Keem betrayed him. He can't forgive himself for that, and even the bartender admits that Keem really messed up. But he points out that drinking to oblivion won't fix anything. What matters now is something far more important, setting Leon free. Keem is confused, so the bartender explains that Leon is likely blaming himself for everything that happened and can't move forward. If Keem truly wants what's best for Leon, he needs to face him and tell the truth. Meanwhile, Leon finds himself cornered in a dark alley by Edgar and a few of his goons. Edgar saw the news of the Winged Knight's downfall and couldn't resist taking the chance to kick Leon while he was down. Edgar has harbored a grudge against Leon for as long as he can remember, hating him for his spotless reputation and immense popularity. Meanwhile, Edgar has always been treated as a scumbag, primarily because he is one. That's not the point. Now that Leon doesn't have his friends around anymore, he has lost the will to defend himself, so Edgar wants to take him out. However, before he can do that, Noll and the others show up and take out all his friends. Edgar yells and asks what Noll is doing here, but Noll just says he just happened to be in the area for a walk. Edgar doesn't believe him and tells Noll to leave because he's getting in the way, but Noll doesn't like Edgar's tone, so he tells him to wash his mouth. Edgar takes this as a personal insult and prepares to fight Noll with his friends. But Edgar's friends aren't as dumb as he is, so they know they stand no chance of beating Noll's party and immediately run away. Noll then decides to teach Edgar a lesson in respect and chops his nose clean off before squishing it beneath his feet. While Edgar is screaming in pain, Noll pulls him by the hair and threatens to give all his friends and family the same nose job if he ever acts like a scumbag again. Edgar is scared out of his mind, so he swears to do as Noll said and runs away. Once he's gone, Noll turns back to Leon and tells him he has some business to discuss with him. He tells Leon that he wants to recruit him into his clan, but Leon can't believe what he's hearing. Noll assures him that his offer is genuine, and if Leon accepts, then he is even willing to make him the vice master of the clan. Noll thinks it's a good deal for Leon, but Leon refuses to ever team up with the likes of Noll. If Noll hadn't come along, the Winged Knights would still be together, or so it seems. But Noll argues that the party was doomed from the start, and Leon knew it too. Leon's righteous and upstanding nature was only possible because of the unwavering loyalty and dedication of his teammates. Yet, no matter how hard they worked, they could never match Leon's natural talent. Eventually, that gap in skill would lead to resentment. Leon admits Noll is right, but he still refuses to accept Noll's offer because it would mean abandoning everything the Winged Knights worked so hard to achieve. Noll challenges Leon, asking if he plans to stop fighting over this. If Leon gives up now, the legacy of the Winged Knights will disappear entirely. However, if he rises as a seeker and makes a name for himself, he could keep their spirit alive. People might call him a traitor, but Noll insists this is the moment for Leon to be selfish if he truly wants to protect what matters to him. Leon considers Noll's words and asks why he chose to become a seeker in the first place. Noll responds without hesitation. He wants to become the greatest seeker of all time, and he will make it happen, no matter the cost. Noll's unwavering conviction is enough to sway Leon. He agrees to join Noll, but warns him that he must follow through on his promises, otherwise, Leon will never forgive him. The two shake hands, sealing their partnership, and leave the alley as allies, united under a new clan. Meanwhile, Miranda reviews the case file with her grandfather, Harold. She finds Noll's actions distasteful, accusing him of tearing apart the noblest party only to steal their leader. Harold agrees that Noel's methods may lack morality, but he can't deny the results. A stronger, more promising clan has emerged, and he's curious to see what they'll accomplish. In fact, Harold already has another quest lined up for them, an abyss that appeared recently with a depth level of 9. It's a challenge far greater than anything Noel's group has faced before. As Noel and the others walk through the city alongside Leon, whispers follow them. People call Leon a hypocrite for siding with the very man who destroyed the Winged Knights. Noel, however, tells Leon to ignore the noise. Once he proves himself, they won't be able to criticize him so easily. Suddenly, a voice yells Noel's name from behind its Keem. Furious, he blames Noel for everything and charges at him, screaming that he's going to kill him. But Leon gets in between the two of them and tries to stop Keem. He tells Keem that killing Noel won't fix anything, but Keem refuses to listen to a traitor. So if Leon is so insistent on protecting Noel, then Keem will have to kill him first. Keem leaps up to attack Leon, so Leon is forced to defend himself. But as he moves to counter Keem, he sees Keem smirk and realizes he is doing all of this on purpose to improve Leon's image. He knocks Keem out in the gentlest manner possible, and once he is on the ground, people begin praising Leon's strength for being able to take an opponent out without even drawing his sword. Leon doesn't think he is right here, but he has made the decision to follow his own path, so he isn't going to turn back now, even if it means Keem will hate him. But as he is walking away, he hears Keem wish him good luck. He wants to turn back to properly make amends with Keem, however, Noel tells him to keep walking because this is what Keem wants. So the best thing he can do for him right now is to grow as strong as possible. Later that day, Noel brings everyone to their new clan house, and he's pretty happy about it since he only had to pay 20 million to get it. The others are shocked that the price was so low, but now that he thinks about it, Leon remembers hearing rumors about this place being a former execution ground, and to this day, everyone who has ever lived here claims to have been haunted by the ghosts of the dead. That's why Noel was able to get such a good deal on this place. In case anyone is worried about the ghosts, he assures them he has a plan and shows off the new skill book he bought, Exorcism. This skill allows him to instantly eliminate all types of undead creatures, so the ghost shouldn't be an issue. With the living arrangements settled, Noel reveals a special necklace for everyone. It features a snake with angel wings, symbolizing the duality of good and evil within their party. From this moment forward, the team will be known as Wild Tempest. A few days later, the newly formed clan takes on their first mission against Garmer. However, the ghosts Garmer keeps summoning quickly overwhelm Noel's exorcism skill. Realizing the situation, Noel notes that Garmer is clearly intelligent and must be trying to wear them down before striking. He orders Koga and Alma to support Leon while he uses his ultimate skill, Siren Blade, to wipe out the ghosts. Leon argues it's too risky, but Noel insists they stick to the plan. Following his instructions, they coordinate their attack and successfully eliminate all the ghosts, but Garmer itself remains untouched, forcing them to retreat into a nearby cave. Everyone is completely drained, barely able to move, but there's no time to recover. Garmer follows them into the cave, declaring that he's going to eat them. Before Garmer can strike, Noel steps forward and makes an unexpected offer, a deal. He promises to share some useful information in exchange for Garmer sparing their lives. Curious, Garmer agrees to hear him out. Noel pulls a mist bottle from his pocket and sprays it into the air. Garmer scoffs, confused about how such a thing could possibly help him. While the mist may not be useful for Garmer, it proves incredibly effective for Noel. It's a fast-acting poison. Almost immediately, Garmer begins to feel its effects. The poison was crafted using one of Alma's assassination skills, specifically a version lethal to beasts like Garmer. Unfazed, Garmer insists that a little poison won't be enough to stop him, but Noel reveals the full truth. He's filled the entire cave with the poison. Overwhelmed, Garmer collapses to the ground. This was all part of his plan, as he had everyone pretend they were losing to lure Garmer into a false sense of security. With Garmer weakened, Noel delivers the final shot to defeat him once and for all. After the mission is complete, he goes to meet Harold, who congratulates him for his first victory as a clan. But Noel isn't satisfied with this alone. He still plans to make it to the top as the greatest seeker ever, and to do that as a talker, he will first make his clan the strongest of all.